I trust you.
I've never done it before.
First time for everything. Hi. Okay, great. Oh, I got it. Yeah, thank you. I assume this is it. I think that's about as good as we can do. I'm still gonna...
There he is. How are you, sir? Good to see you. Hey, good to see you again. Darryl Johnston.
I might later. In there too. Is that the closest?
That's the closest
Okay.
one.
You know, we'll see. We'll see. If I end up needing it, we'll figure it out.
Darryl? Yeah, Darryl's right there.
Are you guys ready? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special magistrate hearing. My name is Christian Waugh, and I am the special master appointed, well, by the parties, by consent of the parties, to preside over this hearing. I'm a board-certified real estate lawyer, and I have some advice and some things that I'll say as we go through this hearing. You might have noticed that we have an agenda for this hearing, and so we're going to try our best to follow that agenda. It was posted outside. The first item on the agenda is the call to order. We just did that. The next two items are the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. So what I'd like to ask is, to the best of your ability and at your own inclination, please join me for the brief invocation and the pledge to the flag by standing. Dear Lord, please give us the grace to be understanding, patient, and tolerant. With these attributes, we can conduct our work in a manner which is pleasing to Thee, our county, and its residents. In the Lord's name, amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. That was very good and patriotic. All right. The next item on the agenda is Section D, which relates to the appeal process and meeting procedures. First, let me tell you about the appeals process. If any person does decide to appeal a decision made by myself today with respect to any matter considered at this hearing, he or she will need a record of the proceedings, and for such purpose, he or she may need to ensure that a verbatim record of the proceedings is made, which record includes testimony and evidence upon which the appeal is to be based. I want to talk about procedures, but first, is the applicant present? Would the applicant's attorney come up to the podium? Sir, could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Darryl Johnston with Johnston Law Group, and I represent Mr. Southworth as trustee and owner of the property.
Welcome, Mr. Johnston.
Thank you.
So what I want to do briefly is just go over, both for yourself, the county, and the members of the public, the way I anticipate this hearing to go. And, broadly speaking, what I'm going to do is follow the county's quasi-judicial ordinance, right? And that's in Chapter 2, Article 2, Division 3 of the Citrus County Code. What this means, each party will have the right to call and examine witnesses, to introduce exhibits, to cross-examine opposing witnesses, and to rebut evidence. Expert witnesses, if any, will have to be qualified. Staff will have the responsibility of presenting any case for the county. And I wanted to ask both the county and Mr. Johnston, are there any persons or entities who have filed an application to be in opposition as a party?
No.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, are you aware of any?
I'm not aware of any.
All right, I don't see any either. Then let's talk about time and presentation. According to the Citrus County Ordinance, the way this works is my understanding of it, is that staff will give a brief synopsis of why we're here, how we got here, and then we get into presentations. The applicant, you, Mr. Johnston, would have up to 30 minutes to make a presentation. Staff gets up to 30 minutes. And then we'll hear from members of the public, who individuals will have 3 minutes to speak apiece. Representatives of organizations and groups will have up to 5 minutes. Now, for both the parties and members of the public, you're not necessarily required to take up all of your time, although you can if you wish. And is this being streamed or?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Well, so for the viewers, it's my understanding that there are members of public in an overflow room as well. I think under due process rules, they're going to have an opportunity to speak as well. So I don't know how that's going to be organized. Do we know?
As you're speaking, is playing in the overflow room, so they're maybe 1 or 2 seconds behind you.
Do we have an idea of the attendance?
Upstairs?
Like 200, 100?
I would say maybe half this room is
Okay.
equivalent is upstairs.
I'm just wondering, so once we get to the public comment, it sounds like we're going to get a lot of input. And so is this going to be a line that stretches through? Are we going to be able to accommodate ADA stuff?
To my knowledge.
Yeah, we've had that before, and we will. When public input starts, we'll go upstairs. He actually just asked, and there was one person, but things change. So
Absolutely.
we'll see, and we'll give them a chance to come down and speak as well.
All right. Can I also ask all of you to put your names on the record here at the beginning?
Kimberly Harrison, Assistant County Attorney.
And I'm Joanna Cantu. I'm the Deputy Director for Growth Management.
Eric Landon, Growth Management Director.
Carissa Faulkner Cable, Recording Secretary.
Elizabeth Hoover, Planning Coordinator. Denise Lynn, I'm the county.
Here.
Denise Lynn, I'm the county attorney, and I'm here today representing the special master.
And thank God for that. So, all right. So then, after members of the public, there is normally a rebuttal of 15 minutes, up to 15 minutes allowed for the applicant, because there may be things in the public comment or otherwise that you want to respond to. And then there's final argument of 5 minutes. That's for the applicant as well, and the staff if I want to allow it. And I expect to make a ruling today, but that depends on what I hear, okay? Are there any questions about the appellate procedure or the meeting procedures for today? Yeah.
Just a quick question. How would you like the witnesses qualified, expert witness? I've got one expert witness. I've got a CV. I can provide it ahead of time to look at. Do you want to voir dire either personally or have me voir dire him, or just tender the CV for his qualifications and have him speak a little bit to confirm them?
Well, as a first matter, I'd say that's up to you, not to me. I think there's just a standard. I understand what your question is. It's sufficient indicia for me to qualify a
Okay.
witness, basically. But let me ask this. Is that CV or resume in the agenda packet?
It is not.
Okay. What's the county's position on whether or not that should be considered at this point?
If it's solely for qualification purposes only and nothing outside of that, we would have no objection to it being received by the court. But anything
agree
beyond
with
that
you.
would be objectionable.
I agree with you. So I think that'll be something I will want to see, just to determine the qualifications of, and is your expert in the room?
He is.
Okay, all right, great. Any other questions about the procedure?
I have none.
Do they want the witnesses sworn?
Well, I'm going to do that, yeah. And just so you all know, all witnesses will end up being sworn. They'll
Yes.
have to testify. That's the way it becomes competent evidence for me to consider at this hearing, okay? All right, the next item on the agenda, ex parte communication. County Attorney.
Yes. Mr. Waugh, have you had any ex parte communications regarding this matter that you want to disclose for the record?
I have had brief ex parte communications with both sides. I received a request from Mr. Johnston to have a meeting prior to the hearing, which I declined and just explained that that's the purpose of the hearing. I then disclosed that to the county last week, I believe, at another hearing that we had separately. And then I sent an email to all the parties indicating I wasn't going to issue a briefing order because everything was already in the agenda packet, and that's kind of the point of this hearing. Does anyone have any objections to that or basis for me to be disqualified?
No.
Any objections?
No.
Okay. So that concludes the ex parte communication portion of the hearing. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped staff announcements. Are there staff announcements?
Only the overflow room, which you've already covered, so thank you.
Lucky me. The next item on the agenda is applications. So this is listed on the agenda as CPA AAPUD 2025-00001, Attorney Darryl W. Johnston for the George L. Southworth, trustee of the George L. Southworth Revocable Trust dated February 17th, 2006. Now, at the onset, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'll sit down when staff gives their brief opening, and then when I get up, I'll have
And
the
before
CV.
I even get to that, what I'm going to do is I have been presented with an agenda packet. It's 280 pages long. My understanding is that it's comprised of the materials from both the applicant and staff for the hearing today. Is that correct?
Yes.
And public input.
And public, there's substantial public input. Is there any objection from either party to us moving that into the evidentiary record at this time?
No objection.
Okay, then I'm going to consider the entire agenda packet, which is online, available for the public, to be a part of the record that I can determine my factual findings on, in addition to whatever comes in through the hearing. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right, then I invite the staff to give a synopsis.
So how we handle these with the Planning and Development Commission, we're planning to today, is having our coordinator give a very brief introduction, and then it'll be the applicants.
Very good.
Thank you. This application proposes to revise the future land use map and land development code atlas map to extractive to allow for a new sand mine. The site is currently designated as agricultural with mobile homes allowed on the LDC atlas and agricultural on the future land use map. The application site contains approximately 322 acres and lies east of West Gum Street and west of the Pine Ridge subdivision in the Crystal River area. This is the proposed site plan, which shows the site lies immediately adjacent to the lands recently acquired by the state for extension of the Suncoast Parkway. Access to the mine is proposed entirely through this adjacent parkway land. Thank you.
Okay. I'd now like to invite the applicant to a presentation.
Darryl, just give me 1 second. For everybody in the room, y'all know I don't usually work the timer. This is my first time, so
Thank you.
hopefully I will do this well. I've got to put 30 minutes on here.
All right, and for the record, I've been presented with, I think, a CV resume for George K. Foster, MSPG, which is in the record that's already been moved into evidence.
And I'm starting your timer, Darryl.
Okay, I don't think we're going to need 30 minutes, but we'll see how we go. And please give a heads up when there's 5 minutes left, if you could. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darryl Johnston. I represent George L. Southworth as trustee of his Revocable Trust, the owner of this property. With me today are Mr. Southworth and George Foster with Creative Environmental Solutions, who is our environmental and water expert and will testify a little bit later. They'll be available to answer any additional questions that you may have that I cannot answer, which is entirely possible that will occur. Mr. Southworth owned approximately 700 contiguous acres in Citrus County, and that was recently bisected by an eminent domain proceeding and a taking by the Florida Department of Transportation for construction of the Suncoast Expressway North Extension through Citrus County. That project requires a lot of fill dirt. In fact, millions of cubic yards of fill dirt. And that sand, also known as fill dirt, which the DOT needs for construction and road extension, is available on Mr. Southworth's property. When he learned of the need for the sand needed for the project, he determined the reserves on his property and determined it could provide the fill necessary for this particular project. And he then began the process of permitting with Citrus County so the sand could be removed and used for this project. Now, there are two land use approvals, which we're here on today, that are needed and required by Citrus County to do this. One is a comprehensive plan amendment to change a future land use map from AG to extractive, and for a portion of two parcels consisting of 322 acres as a master parent parcel, but the actual mining area is approximately 150 of those acres, which are will be shown on exhibits that you'll see. Only the portions of Mr. Southworth's property located north and east of the Suncoast, because he still has some located to the west on the bisected part of this property, but those are not included. Only on the north and east is it included for this application. The second application, other than the comp plan amendment, is an atlas amendment to rezone the property, the 322.181 acres, to allow the extraction of the sand for the project. And again, only 150 of those acres will be the excavation area. Citrus County Planning staff created a staff finding report to the special master, and that's I'll refer to as a staff report, which provides the requests in our application are consistent with the LDCs of Citrus County and the policies of the comp plan. So staff's recommendation of approval came with certain conditions, and we accept those conditions, but just have a brief comment about one or two of them, then I want to add a couple of additional thoughts. The conditions require a 500-foot natural wooded buffer around the entire perimeter, and we don't have a problem with that, and quite frankly, I think we've offered up that. But it would make more sense to make sure that the buffer, to the extent it is around the perimeter of Mr. Southworth's property, isn't buffering other Southworth property. In other words, if it's adjacent to neighbors that are not owned by Mr. Southworth.
But if it's contiguous with the same owner.
Correct. So to the extent that that buffer, and I'm not sure if there's many places in it, but to the extent that buffer is against Mr. Southworth's other property, I don't think that it's necessary to do that. It makes sense to buffer adjacent property that's not owned by my client, and we believe the 500 feet provides the opacity required by the Citrus LDCs. There are a few additional points, both in the application and some that are not. This property is located directly adjacent to the FDOT right-of-way for the Suncoast Parkway extension.
Let me stop you
Yes.
just for a moment. And, people who are strangers to my other special master hearings may not know I often interrupt, and I just have questions. So my understanding is in LDC 4800 that this is in front of me because it requires a PUD for mining. Is that correct?
It is a PUD for mining. That is correct.
And yet what I'm hearing is it would be for a comp plan amendment and rezoning to extractive.
That's correct. And that's my understanding what staff has.
It isn't extractive its own zoning and not PUD?
It is. It is. So I may defer to Joanna on how they have characterized it for us. We are deferring to whatever the county wants us to do
Sure.
to get it done appropriately. So
I'm
if
just
Eric
curious.
or Joanna are,
It's just a question I have.
Would you like to answer now, or when it's staff's
Well,
turn, so we're not taking away from his 30 minutes?
Oh, yeah, I want to know now.
Okay, so to get a mining permit, not only do you need the PUD, but you also need to have the extractive zoning. So he is required to do an atlas amendment, a comprehensive plan amendment, and the permit with the PUD to obtain this use.
But so I'm just going to read from the code. A planned unit development for mining shall be heard by a special master in lieu of the Planning and Development Commission. So we are here for a planned unit development recommendation, correct?
And a comp plan amendment and an atlas
Okay.
amendment, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
and that's why a lot of the reports and other things that staff had asked for the PUD part of the extraction have been provided, because they want to see what's going to be there and what's the plan.
I just need to cross my T's and dot my I's and make sure we're here for the right reason. I'll now get out of your way and let you
Nope,
continue.
not a problem.
But just one second, you said 4,800?
It's in 4800, yes. like, I think it's 4800 G2, or, let's see. G,
Found it.
okay. All right, thank
Found
you.
it.
As I said, this property is located adjacent to the FDOT right-of-way. There are some unique things about what we're trying to do with this property and these hearings that are, quite frankly, significantly different than most extractive-type requests. First, the proximity to this construction area is significant. The project will require about 3.5 million cubic yards of fill. That would have to be delivered to the job site. That delivery is going to come in one of two ways. It's either coming from 300,000 dump trucks filled with sand traveling the roads of Citrus County and traveling continuously over those Citrus County roads, or the sand is delivered from sand using directly to the project using road trucks, off-road trucks, and without dump trucks filled with sand using Citrus County roads. In other words, if it's adjacent to the site, we eliminate the truck traffic and the wear and tear on roads, the traffic impacts, potential safety issues associated with so many trips. For the couple of years this project will be underway. Off-road trucks and the proximity also reduce the project construction time, a benefit. The second is the two sand pits that are contemplated on the property you see on the map within the interior of the Southworth property. In other words, most of the activity to extract sand will be naturally buffered from owners adjacent to the Southworth property. There's no trees or vegetation that's going to be removed within the buffer area. And as part of this land use change, there probably will be about 2 football fields from the northern pit to the nearest owner's property. And when the northern property has had the sand removed, the southern property is probably more than 10 football fields away from where it will be. We believe there is sufficient vegetation to provide 100% opacity, which is more than is actually required. But if there is insufficient plantings at any place within the buffer area, we agree with staff. We'd need to plant it to make sure we've got the required opacity that staff wants for purposes of this project. Similarly, vibration and noise has been raised as an issue, but it's not an issue. We performed just in the last week, and I've got the report that you can't necessarily have because it just got completed within the last few days, that performed vibration and noise studies using the exact vehicles that will be used to perform the work. Those vibrations were determined to be mostly undetectable, noise well within the levels permitted under the Citrus County Noise Ordinance, and quite frankly, it's a borrow pit, which means once it's starting to be dug out, you're going to be below the surface, and the noise is going to disseminate into the pit walls, not extracting out like it normally would. The majority of any noise will be contained within the walls of the pit, and that coupled with the distances from anyone, with the natural vegetation that's there, it's going to protect against noise and is not going to be a source of intrusive noise disturbance. The next item is it's not a permanent mine. Now, typically mines operate throughout Florida, both in Citrus County and other counties around us, without incident, within the codes, in compliance with all the regulatory agencies. But they're permitted for periods of time that will exceed what this is going to be. Sand represents a resource extracted from a subject property, and it's only for that purpose. We've made that in the application. This is not a sand mine that operates in perpetuity, and it's going to have people coming on and off to buy wholesale or retail sand to take to other projects. It's only for this project. It will only operate until the Suncoast extension is completed. And in fact, the areas closest to any neighbors of any densities will be completed within 18 months or less, and then it'll just be far, far away. Air quality is also not an issue. Some people have incorrectly stated that silica dust from this site will cause health issues. We'll have some testimony regarding that, but there is no crushing or grinding of aggregates that will take place. So there's no generation of any significant level of silica dust. We have a dust plan on file with the county that says in the mining operation, this is how we're going to handle dust. It outlines the steps to limit dust from leaving our property. But regular dust and silica is a different animal, and there is not any impact of silica dust because we don't do any crushing that would create that. There is no impact on water quality or water supplies or aquifers. We are not mining lime rock below the water table, but even if we were, there are requirements that allow mining to occur below the water table, perfectly legal, perfectly in compliance, and without detrimental effect to water tables, to water quality, and we're not even near that. We will be removing sand and will not be within 30 feet of the top of the Floridan aquifer, which is about 50 feet below the surface, so we're going down about 18 to 20 feet. Nothing we can do will lower the water table. It would not impact local wells. There's nothing we can do to pollute or contaminate any portion of the groundwater or the aquifer. Now, I'm going to ask George Foster to come up. I provided you his CV. I want him to speak on these water issues and other environmental related issues. He'll speak in the narrative. He's got a presentation he can provide to you, but I would like him to be qualified as an expert for today's purposes.
Okay, and you've provided the CV for the purpose of, proffering his expertise, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Wall.
All right, let me just review it very briefly. Well, I'd say he knows more about it than I do, for sure. All right, I'll hear what he has to say, and then
Okay.
we'll determine whether he's an expert.
Darryl, you've got 19 minutes.
Yeah, actually, thank you, Denise, but we do have a clock up here, too.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm not looking at the clock or I'll lose my way. Anyway, I'm George Foster. Good to meet everybody. I'm a geologist out of Brooksville.
Can you pull this up?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And I'd like, if possible,
I haven't been sworn.
I'd like to swear you in.
Yeah.
So,
Do you want me to?
oh, I mean, do you swear to, raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
Now it's pretty loud. Anyway, Darryl already hit on most of these points, but I'll talk a little bit more about the ones he mentioned already and maybe a couple more. Groundwater contamination. First of all, he's correct. The mine will not contaminate the groundwater. The sand's going to be simply dug out of the ground, piled up, put on trucks, and hauled over to the construction site. There's not going to be any blasting. There won't be any chemicals that are used in the process. There won't be any flocculants that are used to settle the material from in the mining lake. The sand's not going to be sorted or graded or processed in any manner. It's, like I said, it's coming out of the ground, moved a quarter mile and put back in the ground the same way it came out of the ground. Nothing's going to happen to it in between. Any fuels that are used to power the equipment used for mining will be in double-walled tanks stored well away from the excavation area. There'll be spill kits on hand to deal with any minor spills that occur. There won't be any equipment maintenance conducted on site. Hydraulic oil changes, all that'll be done off-site. I've heard some talk about arsenic, concerns about arsenic in the public comment. Silica sand, quartz sand doesn't contain arsenic. Arsenic does occur naturally at levels that exceed what's called the soil cleanup target level for residential direct exposure in clays and organic matter and some marly sediments like limey clay and clay limestone sort of things. Occurs naturally, sometimes above the 2.1, which is the magic number, 2.1 parts per million. Sometimes you find it at 3 and 4 and 5 parts per million naturally in those materials, but not in quartz sand. It just doesn't exist in quartz sand. This is a very clean sand deposit without impurities. The reality is the true risk to groundwater quality in this area and anywhere else in Florida, for that matter, is development. Septic tanks, fertilizers put on lawns, and whatnot. If we turn this into a lake, it'll never be a subdivision. There'll never be fertilizer or septic tanks contaminating the aquifer. So this actually will protect the aquifer from contamination because it's a simple, you're just making a lake is all you're doing. Digging a hole in the sand, it'll fill with groundwater, it'll be a lake. No chance for contamination in the future. There's not going to be any surface water contamination caused by this operation. First of all, there aren't any surface water bodies nearby. All the water generated from the during the mining process stays on the site. There will be no runoff that leaves the site. So there won't be any increase in turbidity, dissolved oxygen, any of those issues that could occur from sediment washing off a property into a spring or a river won't happen because this water is all contained on the site. It's a requirement of the permit. It's against the law to discharge water from a mine. So it's just not going to happen. The water table is not going to be affected. The water level in the groundwater is not going to be lowered. Like I said, any sand, well, I didn't say this, but sand that may be mined from below the water table is going to be piled up on the bank. Water is going to drain back out of that, right back into the aquifer. The only potential use of groundwater on this site will be that little bit of water that will be used on dry, sunny days to fill the water truck that'll be used to spread water on the ground to prevent dust generation, as we'll discuss later in the dust control plan. A little more detail about that there. And the most water that could possibly be used on the worst case day is 60,000 gallons. That's the equivalent of 4 garden hoses running all day together at the same time, an insignificant amount of water. We're not going to do any dewatering. Dewatering is not proposed. Dewatering, for those who don't know, that's where you put a pump in the ground and artificially lower the water table to make it easier to mine the sand. That's not proposed. But even if it were proposed, it still wouldn't affect the water table because by law, you have to put the water from the mining area in perimeter ditches around the excavation to rehydrate the aquifer so that there is no drawdown that goes beyond the property line. But as I said, dewatering is not proposed for this operation. This operation will not result in the formation of sinkholes. Sinkholes can occur, can be induced to form in areas where there are a lot of voids in the limestone and the water table is artificially and dramatically lowered. That water that once buoyed up the sediment above the sinkhole, if it's gone, the sediment can fall into the voids. But we're not lowering the water table. So there's no mechanism whereby this mine could cause a sinkhole to form. We're not using explosives either. Some folks believe that explosives can cause a sinkhole to form. That's not the case. And regardless, we're not using explosives. This operation will not damage nearby wells. The wells in this area are cased through the sand layer, and they're open to the limestone. That limestone is what constitutes the Floridan aquifer. People get their water from the Floridan aquifer. Our sand mining operation will occur when it reaches the water table in the superficial aquifer. They're not one and the same. They're not connected. There are some breaches between the two, but they're not relevant to this discussion. We're not lowering the water table, so thereby there is no mechanism whereby we could cause a well to run dry or a pump to be damaged. And again, blasting won't be conducted. A lot of folks are concerned that blasting will damage wells, but we're not doing any blasting. This operation will have no effect on the springs or the manatees that swim in the springs. The springs, I think, are, 2 miles to the southwest of this project. Runoff's not allowed to leave the property. There's no chance of runoff getting into the streams that lead to the springs or to the rivers. The groundwater is not going to be contaminated by the operation, so there's no mechanism whereby we could contaminate the springs and affect the health of the manatee. And we're not using any groundwater. We're not pumping groundwater, consuming groundwater that might otherwise reduce the flow of groundwater to the springs, the base flow to the springs. We're not doing that. We have a dust plan, a dust control plan on file with the county. We're not going to generate significant amounts of dust. There's only a small fraction of the sand. The sand is a relatively coarse material. There's a very small fraction of that that could even potentially become dust. True dust is generated when the sand is ground or crushed. We're not doing any of that. We're not processing the sand in any way to reduce the size fractions of the sand to generate particles that could become dust. We're watering the roads and the active mining areas on days when it's dry and sunny and windy to make sure that any little bit of dust that is generated never leaves the property. And you've got the 500-foot vegetated buffer between the mine and the nearest homes that'll further protect anybody from any little bit of dust that's generated in the mining area itself. And again, Darryl already touched on this, just a general comment, not really environmentally related, but this mine's going to be built, if there's going to be a mine built in this area, DOT is going to make, that it has to happen because they can't afford to bring the sand in from Brooksville or Levy County. It's too expensive. So there's going to be a mine somewhere in this area. DOT is going to make sure that happens. So the perceived threats that we see here, that people have raised here, they're just going to move a mile down the road or 2 miles down the road or a quarter mile down the road. The same perceived issues are going to follow this project. But this project's going to be built. And the beauty about this one, about this location, is that all the truck traffic on the county roads, all that truck traffic is eliminated. All the accidents that would otherwise occur won't happen. All the damage to the roads that otherwise would happen won't happen. It's really the best place for this sand source for this stretch of the parkway. So,
I do have some questions.
yes, sir.
So is everything on this CV accurate, true to the best of your belief?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you been retained to act as a consultant or expert for the applicant in this?
Yes, sir.
All right. Are you being compensated for that service?
Yes, sir.
Is there any reason why that would affect your testimony today?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever testified in a similar hearing like this before?
Yes, sir.
All right. I have some substantive questions as well. You mentioned clean sand deposit without impurities. What is that? What do you mean by that? Like impurities?
Impurities like clay and organic matter and things like that, naturally occurring impurities.
And it doesn't have that?
No, it's very clean sand. Has to be for the purposes of the application.
Okay. And what have you reviewed to determine that?
We did test borings out there. I've seen the sand myself.
All right. This may seem like a dumb question, but I mean, why is it that septics are worse than a mine for the aquifer?
Septics and fertilizer both introduce nutrients to the aquifer, to the groundwater, and that's what's fouling our springs today. That's what causes the algae.
So even though the mine is potentially significantly closer to the aquifer, it doesn't have the same contaminant issue?
Right. You're not putting any phosphorus or nitrogen on the ground.
Okay.
You're not putting anything on the ground.
You mentioned that it's not proposed to use dewatering. Does that mean that it will not be used?
If somebody applied for an application modification, it could be considered by the county and the water management district.
Okay. And I noticed that language elsewhere in the application. There's a lot of mention of proposed, not proposed, but I
Right.
wonder what it means is that as it stands right now, it's not proposed, though it could be anywhere that
Could be
language is
proposed,
used.
but denied, of course.
Okay.
Yes.
And I would ask the members of the public just to kind of do your best to let us handle the testimony. You will get your chance. Sinkholes. So what would lower the water table in order to lead to sinkhole formation?
Well, I'll give you a good example. That agricultural area in Plant City, you remember, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, during one of those bitter, cold nights, the strawberry farmers turned on all their wells to water the fields. It lowered the water table 30 or 40 feet, and sinkholes opened up everywhere, including the one that swallowed the guy up and his house fell in, and they never found him. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Okay. Now, I don't think you're proposing to be an expert on this. You mentioned that FDOT, that it would be too expensive to bring sand in from anywhere else, but you're not, are you qualified as an expert to
No, sir.
testify on that?
No, sir.
Okay. That's a personal opinion?
Yes, sir.
All right. I do find that you are an expert in the subject matter, and I'll allow your testimony to be considered as expert testimony. Is there anything else you'd like to offer
No,
as part of
thank
the
you.
presentation?
No, sir.
Okay.
We do have some
Yeah,
questions
by all
for
means.
staff.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, wait a minute, are you asking,
cross-examining.
should we wait till the applicant is done with his? Oh, Mr. Johnston is saying, do it now.
Okay. All right, just a few questions then. You talked a lot about the dust, and I think you've addressed some of the questions about the dust impacts. This is also an equestrian community. Does that change that at all with the dust impacts there might be for not just people, but horses as well? Does that change what you're saying?
Well, again, I don't know what the permissible exposure limit is for a horse, but I can't imagine it's more stringent than for a human. So,
Okay. I heard you say that the aquifers don't connect, but I know in the report you say they actually are hydrogeologically connected.
Right, what that
So-
means is, you want to explain what that means?
Please.
Basically, you've got sand with a little water, with 5 or 10 feet of groundwater in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got clay, and then you've got limestone. And in the limestone, that's the Florida aquifer, where the bulk of the groundwater is. There are breaches in that clay that allows the water levels to be similar. So it's not a perfect barrier, it's an imperfect barrier between the two.
But you don't think that this particular use, this excavation in this location would be detrimental to the Florida aquifer?
Well, it would only be detrimental if we were somehow lowering the water level in the Florida aquifer or putting contamination into the Florida aquifer. We're doing neither.
Okay. And there's
So
also.
really, the fact that it's not even really, doesn't really need to be part of the discussion whether there's a clay layer or not, because we're not digging that deep.
Okay, and the final question on your testimony, because I'm not an expert on this either. It is a basin management action plan area.
So what,
A
ma'am?
BMAP area, a basin management action plan. Can you address that? Are there going to be any concerns with that particular designation here?
No, as I said, phosphorus and nitrogen come from septic tanks and fertilizers, not sand mines.
So you don't see this as a problem with the recharge?
It's
Okay,
actually, no, for recharge, no, actually, the recharge of the aquifer may be greater, may improve flow to the springs, actually. It just depends. It's complex modeling that's never been done. Usually, when a water management district looks at a water balance at a sand pit, they assume that, you dig a hole and you've exposed the water table, you can have a little more evaporation, obviously, than the evaporation you would get through the sand. You still get evaporation, it's called evapotranspiration. But more water lands unimpeded back into the aquifer, it's kind of a wash. You know what I'm saying? So instead of it landing on the sand and then evaporating, it goes right back into the aquifer. So bottom line is the net effective flow of groundwater to the spring will not be affected.
okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry, I have one more question I
Yes, sir.
forgot. You mentioned that it would be a limited use, but this is an application for permanent change, to the comp plan and rezoning. So why is it temporary? Or what makes it temporary?
Well, the sand, there will be no market for the sand after the turnpike is built because we're not asking to sell it to anybody besides the DOT.
Yeah, and Mr. Wall, our PUD for the mining extraction is to be limited. That's all we've ever talked to with the City County about. So
The PUD itself would be time limited.
Well, I don't know if it's time limited, but it certainly would be limited by whatever the turnpike extension project needs, because
Okay.
we are not providing the sand resource for anything else.
I see. All right, that makes sense to me.
The only other thing I would say, do you have any other questions for Mr. Foster?
I do not.
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, George. The only other thing I will mention, folks, is my client's chosen this path of compliance, and will meet 100% of the Citrus County LDC requirements, will obtain all SWIFMUD permits and any other permits that are required for this use that we are seeking. And it is a temporary use, even though when you rezone the property and change the comp plan to extractive, you would say, well, my goodness, it's going to be there forever. Well, the land use is going to be there forever, but the resource is not, and we've obligated ourselves publicly by application and through the PUD that it's only tied to this project. We'll hear what the public has, and we'll have an opportunity to rebut that, but staff has recommended approval. Staff is a qualified expert. Mr. Foster has testified regarding water and other environmental issues, and he's been qualified as an expert. It's a land use change that is project specific, and we ask that you recommend approval to the Board of County
I
Commissioners.
have another question for you.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate the presentation. I did my best to look through the record in anticipation that it would become evidence. I noticed that there's I want to make sure I understand it right. There's 2 wetland areas in the property?
I may have Mr. Foster come back up, but
Okay.
that is correct. There are 2, George, can you come talk about the 2 minor wetlands that are?
I was yakking, I didn't hear the question.
That's
I'm sorry.
okay. It's my understanding that there's 2 wetland areas on the property?
Yes, sir.
And what would happen to those properties
They would be-
if this was all approved and moved forward?
They would be taken in the mining, they would be consumed by the mining process.
Okay.
Well, I think there are 2 small ones that would be taken and one in the buffer that would be retained. And the compensation would be through purchase of credits at a wetland mitigation bank.
We have to mitigate any wetlands, no matter what quality of wetlands there are, for whatever would be used. And as he said, there are 3 minors. One is within the 500 setback. It's not going to be impacted. The other 2 are, but there's going to have to be wetland credits purchased or otherwise exchanged to mitigate that.
And the water management's already been out there. The value, the credits required to mitigate is the number of credits that's already been determined. And they'll be purchased the second this project is permitted.
I mean, I take it as a truism. You have to follow all other laws. I was just curious what was going to happen to it. I think that's it for my questions at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Still have some.
Yeah, and now it's staff's turn.
Just a
I'm
few.
sorry, Darryl, I didn't give you your warning. You have 3 minutes and 49 seconds left.
And I'm
Sorry.
still, I have a few questions for him still, but I don't think it's part of that. Is
No,
it?
it's not.
Not, okay, super. When you submitted the application, you did not have the environmental resource permit yet. I think from SwiftMud is where you're getting it. Do you have that now in hand, or is that, where is the status of that?
Just today, via email, we received a request for additional information that included a couple of what I'll call piddly requests, and will be easily answered, and we'll have the permit shortly.
So we haven't seen the conditions. I know that you make a statement in the documents that you think it'll be consistent with what you've proposed to staff. Are there anything significant in that ERP that are different from what you proposed?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. I think we were getting some comments from neighbors that there's some work going on site. I know there's a timberland exemption from ag classification from the property appraiser. Is that what's happening there?
If I misstate this, I'm going to ask Mr. Southworth to correct me, but we recently did a vibration and noise test. In order to get the equipment to a location that is close to that 500-foot buffer, we had to clear some area, not in the 500-foot buffer, but outside the 500-foot buffer, for them to pull the equipment there and start making a racket with revving the things. And we were back on the property line with noise monitors and vibration detectors to determine. So the answer is, there has not been anything within the buffer. There has been a limited amount of activity which we could call related to ag, but the reality is we were just trying to get an accurate idea of noise and vibration for that 500-foot buffer area.
Okay. Can you pull up the aerial again, please? I wanted to see where you're pointing to your clients owning adjacent property. Which
Yeah,
one?
and I'm not sure that it even exists, but the whole, well, is
There is-
this a pointer?
Yeah.
Push and hold the center. And point to there.
Actually, it works either way.
Cat's coming to your
Hang on,
rescue.
we have our tech.
The upper one? Okay.
Yeah, she said
All
center.
right. I think Mr. Southworth owns everything that's in the yellow, and the actual area is, I don't know, it's kind of right in here and then up in here. There may not be any, Ms. Coutu, but to the extent there are, George, you want to?
May I?
Yeah. Here, do you want to point this?
There's
Or?
only 2 areas.
Actually,
Well,
sir,
George,
before you
George,
start
George,
speaking,
let them know you've been sworn.
Yep,
if
I
you
gotta
haven't been. And then if you want to point it.
sir, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
And what's your name for the record?
George L. Southworth.
Thank you, sir.
All right. There are only 2 other properties on this map that, well, actually,
I need to get you in the microphone. I'm sorry, it's
Right.
just,
there are 4 other properties adjacent to this that I own. They're the sections 12-100, 12, I think it's 200, and then I own 2 one-acre lots immediately to the left of those. I don't really believe there's any reason to reduce the buffer on those pieces. We might as well just keep the 500-foot line around.
well, I mean, I think the reason why it might make sense, and I'm just speaking off the cuff, is that you may decide to do other things with those properties. I don't know if they're not subject, so the buffer would still end up being a good idea. Well, we'll take that up later. It's really not the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
And finally, timeframes, I hadn't heard you say it's going to be a temporary for the parkway construction. So do you have any idea of that? The county code says the life of the ERP, so that's going to be pretty extensive. Do you have any timeframes on this?
I can only tell you what I have heard. Mr. Southworth probably can give you a better idea, but my understanding is it's probably 24 to 36 months.
Okay. I was looking for some kind of year estimate, nothing locked in at this
Yep.
point. All right, and the buffer. It needs a type D buffer surrounding where it abuts residential. I don't think the trees there now meet that. Is that your testimony that you think it does?
The Class D buffer is typically when you're buffering commercial and residential uses, and it's much more of a planting buffer, and it's within a typically 35-foot area. This is a 500-foot buffer that we believe is naturally vegetated enough, but if it is not, we can provide whatever plantings staff wants us to have. I'm just not sure the Class D designation necessarily is necessary, number one, or is necessarily going to achieve what we need to achieve, but as opposed to planting locationally certain types of trees or shrubbery or other things that will provide the opacity and barrier that you're looking for.
Okay, well, one of the conditions suggested, if this is considered, is to meet this type D, and if you can't, do an 8-foot berm or additional plantings. Is that the one you wanted to talk about? Or?
We can talk about the additional plantings and whatever we would need to have there and how we could achieve that. But we're going to definitely, we think a berm is overkill.
Mm-hmm.
We think Class D may be, but the plantings, if they achieve the Class D or the berm effect that the staff is looking for, that's what we're willing to do.
Okay, and just a correction, staff does not make a recommendation in our staff report. We don't do that.
Okay.
So I know you said that, but we're not recommending one way or the other.
Okay, well, I'd seen where, I apologize, I thought I'd seen where they had opined that it was consistent with the comp plan, consistent with the land development regulations, and I thought I saw a recommendation, but I
Okay.
must not have. Sorry about that.
I'm finished with Special Master. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, is that all you'd like to
For
present?
now, yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. On to staff. Wait, I changed my mind. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnston. I'm sorry. In your application and as assessed by the staff in its report, you mentioned the comprehensive plan policies that the application may be consistent, the changes may be consistent with. Are there any policies in the comp plan that you think are inconsistent with this?
I don't know of any. There may be, but I didn't review the comp plan for inconsistencies. But it's acreage that's able to have a huge buffer to accommodate a temporary extractive use, and I think what was cited by us and in staff's report is what supports its consistency with the comp plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I have not been sworn in, but Carissa keeps standing up too if you'd like her to, but either one of y'all want to swear me in, that's fine.
I think I can handle it. I
I
don't know.
This is your
Do you-
payback.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do,
Thank
thank
you.
you. All right, so I'm going to follow along with the PowerPoint at the same time. I'm sorry, Joanna Catu, Deputy Director of Growth Management. So this is actually the vision from Pine Ridge, from Corral Place, where it dead ends into the site. And the reason I'm keeping this up here, and I'm going to have another slide without the wording on top of it, is this is the area I really don't think a type D buffer is met here. It's even if you're looking at the large area, it's supposed to have 20 trees, 6 trees, 24 shrubs, and 12 conifers per 100 feet. I don't think we're making that. That's why that condition I was definitely talking about. Your statement about comprehensive policies, I'll go ahead and address that. I know you didn't give that one to me.
I was going to ask you, so yeah.
You didn't give that to me. So there is one policy that staff added, or actually several, but one of them, policy 3.13.2, vegetative buffering shall be established by new or expanding mining operations where the location of adjacent land uses do not provide natural buffering. I think this is an exact site that does not provide, at this point, the natural buffering. He is going to have to add some buffering to that.
Can you give me the number of that again?
3.13.2.
3.13.2.
It's actually page 239 of the
I
packet.
see it, okay. Vegetative buffering shall be established by new or expanding mining operations where the location of adjacent land uses do not provide natural buffering.
Right.
Well, help me are you saying it's not consistent with that?
I'm saying that that is a concern because that is a policy that must be met, and I don't think at this time this is meeting it. So that also supports the fact that staff is saying they may need to do a berm as well as and some plantings to try to meet this.
Are you saying there is no vegetative buffering right now?
No, there's some, but very little.
Okay.
There are areas that are more dense than this, but this is the one right by houses. This is where the road dead ends in Pine Ridge to that. So that is probably the closest proximity to residential structures. So this is the land use map. It is agricultural. Although it says RUR for Pine Ridge, it's actually RUR with a planned development overlay. There's a master plan. Those are all residential lots to the east. And they also have an equestrian buffer, equestrian trail right there on the west side of Pine Ridge. So they would be buffering up to this. That's why that buffer is additionally very important. Now, the parkway is not showing up on our maps yet at this point. The FDOT is still working on acquisition. But what I did do is this lovely, I know graphics aren't great, but the blue is the area that was acquired by the Florida Department of Transportation so far for the parkway. So we do know this site will directly abut it, and the red area outlines the area that is proposed. And you can see now the Pine Ridge lots there to the east. Many of them are developed, not all. There are some areas in Pine Ridge that are not yet developed. And there's some larger lots to the west, north, and smaller lots to the west, which I think you heard testimony that Mr. Foster may own a few of those. So this is the setback, Mr. Southworth, yes, thank you. This is the setback for the mines that's being proposed, a 100-foot setback from the right-of-way where they abut Suncoast, and a 500-foot natural wooded buffer. You've heard me talk about that a couple times, only because that is the one area of this application that is requesting a deviation if we don't follow the type D. Otherwise, they are meeting the standards of the Land Development Code. They are proposing to address the same hours of operation, the excavation standards. They're going to do mine safety and security, screening. Their setbacks are being met. So the plans in the Land Development Code, they are meeting with that one exception of the buffer, and you heard Mr. Johnston say they are willing to enhance or add to meet that. This again was the site from Pine Ridge. This is a little bit easier. You can see that probably the 20 trees and shrubs and conifers, I don't think it's being met here, and they will have to enhance this particular area. This is on the east side. I could not see the north boundary because of residences, so I don't know if it's all the way around, but I would expect so. So there are findings of fact in the staff report, and we are suggesting if this application is recommended for approval, there'll be 13 conditions. And very quickly, I should have opened with this, and I didn't. This is a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. Because of the size of the application and the land use change, the state requires there's 2 hearings with the Board of County Commissioners. So regardless of your recommendation, there will be a hearing to transmit the application to state agencies, and then it'll go back to the County Commission for another hearing for adoption. So I'm just letting the audience mostly know that there are 2 hearings ahead of us after this one. This is not by any means a final, but this is a recommendation because the Land Development Code says for mines, in lieu of the Planning and Development Commission, we use a special master.
Well, and regardless of my findings and recommendation, the BOCC could always basically tell me to, for lack of a better expression, pound sand.
And they do that regularly with staff as well, and that is their right. That is their right, but they will have 2 hearings or not. They can choose not to even transmit it, but to get this to pass, they will need 2 hearings. The first is simply to transmit to the state. That will include areas like not only the Florida Department of Transportation, which of course has an interest in this, but also DEP, the Southwest Florida Water Management District, Fish and Wildlife, because there are protected species on this site, they will have to address those items. We know there's gopher tortoises here. They suspect there's eastern indigo snakes. Those are protected. There's some scrub jays. So those items are also going to have to be dealt with before they can commence activity.
Which is something they have to do as a matter
They
of law.
have to do anyway, so they're not getting a pass for it by going through this procedure. But they will have to, the commission will have to send this to the state, and the state will send it to those various agencies, get their comments back, and then have their final hearing.
And it's my understanding, Pine Ridge is historically an equestrian community, or is designed that way,
Correct.
correct? I want to make sure I understand what's being said about the buffer. So this, I understand the recommendation that's being made by staff, and I'm going to read page 246 of the packet. A minimum 500-foot natural wooded buffer shall be installed around the perimeter of the site, with the exception of the boundary directly abutting the Suncoast Parkway. If this buffer area cannot meet the equivalent of a Type D buffer without a wall, as outlined in the LDC, a minimum 8-foot berm and/or additional plantings to a Type D equivalency will be required to mitigate impacts to surrounding residential areas. So I want to ask you a couple of questions about this. Is it your understanding that they have agreed to this condition?
That is what I heard from Mr. Johnston a few minutes ago,
Okay.
yes.
And because I didn't quite hear it that way, so I just
Okay.
want to make sure, and we might get into that. But based on this recommendation, it seems to me that you're saying if the buffer area cannot meet a Type D buffer standard, then a minimum 8-foot berm would be required. Is that right?
Right.
So you're not saying both necessarily at the same time, right?
Right. The code says you're to Type D, but if you don't meet a Type D, a berm might be considered. So it's a flexibility. A berm is, probably more costly, but it's an option. I'm not actually asking for both, no.
So are you asking, is staff saying that should I, at the conclusion of the hearing, recommend approval, that that condition be incorporated? And if so, how do I protect, or how do I determine when a 500-foot natural wooded buffer meets the Type D or not? Is that in staff discretion? How does that end up getting determined to require the berm?
It is at the time of permitting, so let's assume if it gets approved, they'll have to come back through for permitting. And part of permitting will be a staff full review. We'll go out there, we'll look at the plantings, et cetera.
Okay. Do you know which way the prevailing winds go in that area?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Actually, is this, let me ask you just a few more questions about your staff report. You're the author of the staff report, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's talk about the standards for this. For me, what are the actual findings that you think I have to make one way or the other in this hearing?
Well, for the PUD, the findings start on page 244. Those are straight from the Land Development Code.
In other words, based on the standards under 4300 and actually specifically 4302 PUD approval procedures, elements A through J, I'll have to make factual findings of those elements.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And that's what staff is trying to give you their version of it, but you can, again, tell me to pound sand as well. So perfectly fine, but that is our interpretation looking at the Land Development Code.
The PDC doesn't normally make actual findings. They just make the motion is usually something along the lines of, we find that the application is either consistent with the comprehensive plan and the land development code, or it is not consistent with those two things, and does not specifically announce findings.
Interesting.
We can give you a copy of the normal PDC recommendations for your review.
Putting Carissa on the spot, but.
I know she's got her book over there.
She
so.
is. She is on top of it. If I could, too, the conditions of approval that are in the staff report do have a typo in them. I'll go through those very quickly. I don't want to really read them, but I'll paraphrase if that's all right. Condition 1 would be the master mining plan for sand mining only, providing a total extraction area not to exceed 150 acres. You heard Attorney Johnston say that figure several times. Number 2 are the days and hours of operation are limited to those outlined in the Land Development Code. That's Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., Saturday, 7 a.m. to 12 p.m., and no Sunday. Number 3, they need to secure the areas of excavation by installing and maintaining fencing at a minimum no less than 4 feet in height, and posted with no trespassing signs every 100 feet and at each corner of the property. Again, that is word for word from the Land
But that's
Development Code.
That's in here. I mean, you said it's a typo?
No, condition number 6 is a typo. I wasn't there yet. I apologize.
sorry.
I can go
Okay.
right to it. That's fine. Condition 6 says at time of permitting, applicant will need to provide certified boring, and that should be logs, not lots, to the county for the area being excavated. A plan showing the boring locations will need to be submitted for county approval prior to the borings being made. And I did subject our engineering staff to some questioning on what they were doing with these boring logs. They're looking for the aquifer and how it's impacted. Then there are other conditions I can go into not, but you've read the 500-foot buffer. I think that's probably the most important. But condition number 10 also says there shall be no mining traffic access on the residential roads in the Pine Ridge subdivision, including West Corral Place.
Okay. Yeah, I've read it, and that makes sense. So I think I understand, and I do understand what is traditionally recommended and the way it's traditionally recommended, and I understand why it is that way. That certainly seems simple enough. I'll see if I can handle it or make it more complicated. We'll see. Is there anything else that staff wants to present?
I don't think so at this time. I know they want to ask me any questions, but
Yeah. I'll allow for a cross-examination at this time.
he's being kind.
Well, let me just ask one question.
In the
Class-
mic, in the mic.
Just the Class D buffer. What's the purpose of the Class D buffer, and what opacity is it seeking to obtain over what period of time?
So the Class D buffer is our highest buffer. It is not there's not a purpose so much as a buffer is buffering like any other buffer. It's trying to adjacent impacts to lands. So you're looking at not only noise but visibility, et cetera. So a buffer serves a lot of purposes. It's not an opacity item. It's and I had to write it down because I don't have it memorized either. It is a density thing. So for per 100 feet, a type D buffer is 6 trees, 24 shrubs, and 12 conifers to get that overstory kind of idea. So that is a fairly dense buffer. It is our most intense.
And just so I understand, Joanna,
If you don't
Okay.
mind that.
No,
I
that's
think that
fine,
would
yeah.
work better.
the only other question is on the Class D. Are you suggesting that the entire 500 feet needs to have the Class D, or the typical 35 to 50 feet buffer that houses a Class D?
Within that 500 feet, there needs to be a Class D.
Gotcha.
That's how
Okay.
the buffers work. It's
Right.
not a continuous thing, although that'd be lovely, but it just needs to have those amount of plantings per 100 feet on the entire buffer.
Thank you.
All right, does that conclude the cross-examination?
What's the question?
There is an opportunity for rebuttal. I mean, unless you have a cross-exam.
We're still just wanting to make sure we understand the Class D requirements. I
Yeah.
think Joanna adequately asked about, what's your question?
Well, I hope it's not a dumb question, but I really, since
No
I'm,
dumb.
I may be working on
Please
this.
speak
I
into the
need to
microphone
understand.
if you would.
Yeah. You want the equivalent of a Class D buffer, is what I'm hearing, what I'm reading and hearing. You want the equivalent of a Class D buffer.
Right,
Correct.
with those plantings per 100 feet,
But
yes.
that is a Class D buffer. What's the equivalent of a Class D buffer?
Sir,
Seems
could
to
you
me
please
like
speak
it would
into
be
the
something
microphone?
that offered a similar opacity, for example. What is the equivalent of a Class D buffer? Seems it's obviously not a Class D buffer, it's something else. And my suggestion is that 500 feet of,
Oh,
let's just say, less densely planted trees would be equivalent to 25 feet of densely planted trees, because you wouldn't be able to see through that any better than you would be able to see through 25 feet of, that's my question. I don't understand the equivalent part.
Right, it needs to meet the 6 trees, 24 shrubs, 12 conifers. That's a type D buffer.
Per 100 feet.
Per 100 feet.
That's not the equivalent.
It's okay. We understand what it is.
Okay, I'm not following, but I'm
I
glad. I'm
am
glad-
following, because what I think the issue is that what it says in the staff report is, well, actually, let me go to the recommendations. If this buffer area cannot meet the equivalent of a type D buffer. So I think what's being pointed out is it's not saying if the buffer area cannot meet type D buffer. It's saying if it can't meet the equivalent. So what's the difference? Why would you use the word equivalent as opposed to just type D buffer? Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay.
Planning speak, I don't know. The idea is that you have the minimum buffers, and you have to meet it.
Yeah, I think.
In this case, because they're offering such a big area, they have to meet enough to be like a type D buffer. Is that a type D buffer? Yes, I still have trouble with my planning speak, taking that word out.
Let me put it this way. If I did issue if I did consider that as a condition, I would not say equivalent. I would say type D
Type
buffer.
D, understood.
I think the issue is that if there is not natural vegetation that
Correct.
meets the type D buffer requirements, that they would build a type D buffer.
Yeah, that's where I'm
Okay.
coming from with it. Thank you very much. But
Okay.
however, if the wording's funky.
Because the idea is that and Darryl, if I'm speaking out of turn, let me know. But what I understand is you're trying to keep it as natural as possible. But if if nature doesn't equal type D, then you have to plant type D. Sorry for interrupting.
Thank you.
Did you want them to try to
I'm just-
fix the language?
I'm
in your
not sure.
condition?
So,
I like what you're saying. You can try
yeah,
it.
that's a little different than what's in the report. So I'm going to reserve on that for now. I don't think we need to resolve that at this point. I think we need to get to the meat of this. Has the staff concluded its presentation?
Yes, yeah, she's pointing out very clearly to me, if it had, instead of 12 conifers, it had 10 conifers, it would have to add 2 more. So they need a type D buffer, period. We are trying to consider, because it says natural wooded buffer, we want that natural wooded buffer, but we think they're going to have to beef it up to meet a type D. The word's equivalent, we're trying to steer you to something different, just, you gotta get there,
Mm-hmm.
however you
Okay.
can.
All right. Well, according to the Land Development Code, the Citrus County Code, the next stage of this would be public input. And participants in favor of or in opposition to the matter shall be permitted to make their statements. I've already given the time limits, and I really want to hear what the public has to say. I'll let you know, I have already read the very substantial public input that has been made and submitted to me. I think I've read everything, and so I would keep that in mind as well, but you have the opportunity to come forward and speak, so I'd ask you to come forward. And I don't know how the county wants to organize it, but if you need to make a line, make a line. I guess I would go around that way, if you can.
And we are opening this with the overflow room as well, but we will try to do a traffic cop here. You're fine.
Yeah, I don't want to, but I don't know how.
Y'all don't have to stand the whole time, just if you see the folks dwindling, maybe then just come back.
Yeah, there's
Many of you have been through this before. I recognize a lot of your faces.
Yeah, look, just to be clear, I'm not imposing a requirement that you stand now. We'll get to everybody.
Yeah, there's no prize.
But I know sometimes you want to get in line, so it's up to you. All right, so, sir?
And
Alex.
they do all have
Alex.
yellow forms. When they approach, if they could hand them to Clarissa, who has her hand raised,
Okay.
on their way to the podium. Thank
Okay,
you.
so what's been raised to me is that most of you, if not all of you, who are coming to give public comment, ladies and gentlemen, if you would, those of you who have yellow cards, when you come up, please provide it, and then we'll get, I guess, does that have a name and an address, or? Okay.
But they still-
Sir, can you please put your name onto the record, and
Not a problem. It's Alex Antonucci.
and I'm sorry, sir, I really want to get to you.
That's
Ladies
okay.
and gentlemen, I can't hear the public comment unless, we will get to you, I promise. And I'll just wait till it's over. Okay, I think it's at a decent volume now. Sir, please proceed.
No problem. My name is Alex Antonucci. I live in Pine Ridge, and I had a speech prepared, but
I'm sorry, sir, I'm going to ask if I can just interrupt you.
That's okay.
Mr. Johnston is motioning, are they going to be sworn? We don't generally swear the public.
no problem.
I'm not going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a speech all prepared, but due to the expert witness, under oath, he said, it will not cause the water table to go down. It will not create sinkholes. How can he tell us that? That's an impossibility. It just doesn't make sense to me. So that's one thing. And part of my speech was, sand acts like a sponge. It filters out contaminants. Removal of the sand will cause irreparable damage because it will allow the contaminants to get into the aquifer in the groundwater. The fact, if he does contaminate our water, we have to build a water treatment plant. That cost far outweighs what it costs to truck sand to the site. Plus, I believe, and I'm not positive of this has already been out to bid last week, this section 3A. So they already know where they're getting the sand from. They don't need the sand from this mine. DOT even said they have adequate amount of sand. This is in a residential neighborhood. It doesn't belong in a residential neighborhood. This could cause some substantial problems for the neighborhoods. It's just shouldn't be done. I urge you to not approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Antonucci. Sir, if your yellow card.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Corelli, and I am also a resident of Pine Ridge. My wife and I have a home approximately 1,000 feet from the site of this sand mine. And I also have a prepared speech, but I want to address something. He said that the sand doesn't go up in the air. I have horses. I have a horse ranch. I've got about 3/4 of an acre, which they call a dry lot, that is sand. And on any windy day, my little 3/4 of an acre kicks up so much sand that I have to go in and do an eye wash when I'm done. So there's no way. I don't have any employees with me to back me up on this, but I can tell you firsthand. And the sound test that they did, many of us came out of our houses to see what all the noise was. It was really loud. So for them to say it was unobtrusive is, I mean, the only thing that's non-negotiable in life is fact. So they can make things up, but I live there, so I know what the facts are. You know, my wife and I have worked our entire lives, 14 hours a day for 50 years. And we bought a home in Pine Ridge to live out, our golden years there. And now this is being jeopardized. We put all our money into our home. We're going to have 2 to 3 years of just chaos. And I don't think that it should be permitted. I mean, I think we should learn from what happened in Lee County and in Levy County. We all know what happened there. Levy County, the Board of Commissioners passed it. Due to some technicalities that they didn't cover, a judge overruled it. Lee County got in some serious financial trouble from contaminated water. And now Citrus County's looking at the same thing, and it's right in our backyard. So I'm not going to read any of this because you're much smarter than I am.
Oh, please don't assume that. That's
well, I
big
think
mistake.
you are.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you to vote no on Mr. Southworth's request. It's not his life that's being turned upside down, it's ours, and it's our neighbors. And the sand and the sound travels a lot, and it's gonna be, I can't even imagine what kind of living hell we're gonna be in for the next 3 years. I could sit here and quote the different laws and precedents that, and statutes that would say that you really can't approve this, but you know them better than I do. And I would just ask you, please, just look at your conscience. Do you want these people to go through this? The DOT, I let you all know the day that sand mine became available in Lecanto, that 100-acre sand mine became available. There's other ways to get this sand in. Sure, it's not the most convenient, it's not the most cost-effective to have to truck sand in. But as you said, the DOT.
Sir, sir, I think that's
I'm done.
past your 3 minutes.
That's great. I really appreciate your time. Thank you
Mr.
very
Corelli.
much. Next time I'll bring my employees.
Sir, do we already have your yellow card? Thank you.
Stephen Schwartz, 2568 West Mesa Verde Drive, Beverly Hills. Special Master, I would like to see the studies to the following questions. How deep will it go? It's been stated 16 to 18 feet. But how close to the sediment layer will that get? What is the depth of the sediment layer? What is the sediment layer below the dig composition? We were told clay. And how deep does that go before reaching a limestone? What is the thickness of the limestone before the aquifer begins? What direction does the aquifer go? Flow, I should say. Will it flow out where the manatees congregate in the winter? If you put a lake to fill the hole, will the lake corrode the sediment over time? Will the pressure from the lake cause the sediment to collapse, causing a sinkhole? With the aquifer and the springs become contaminated, not just from the silt, but from pollen, or since there was no other things there prior to, will it seep in, including from what exists from the wetlands? How many humans and animals will be affected from the loss of the wetlands to the manatees inclusive? The law of attraction, sometimes called karma, is important when you make a decision. It is like a mirror. What you project always reflects back. Transparency. Special Master, I'd like to thank you because you have been very transparent from the moment this began. And knowing the answers to my questions, along with what could go wrong, usually helps when you make a sole decision that has an effect on all life, not just the humans here, but the animals and the trees and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you, committee. I appreciate you giving me this time. My name is Steve Wagner, and I live at 6618 West Sentinel Post Path. If you look at that map on the upper right-hand side, we are Beverly Hills Farms. But our situation is a little bit unique because my wife and I also own property in Beverly Hills Estates. So, real tight-knit community, and we've got, connections throughout Pine Ridge, throughout the farms. And it's been just a wonderful place that just kind of drew us here. This is nature's coast. And so when you think about, the nature, the wildlife, the peace, the quiet, the tranquility, that's why we came here. So my wife and I take care of our 90-year-old father. And so he's got dementia. And maybe that's kind of irrelevant to this situation, but this is just the perfect environment for him. And we want to give him just a real peaceful life. My real concern, and I'm not going to go through everything that I have here, is really about the border. Because one thing we're not talking about is really the future. This is phase one. In phase two, this property is going to be developed and could completely change. They're putting in some lakes right now, and I think that it could be a wonderful, beautiful thing. I'm not against progress. I'm against good science. I don't want, assumption. I want good data. I want best practice. I want to follow procedure. But, once this is complete and they start developing this land, that buffer could disappear. If for some reason you choose to approve this permit, I would propose that you make that barrier of 500-foot permanent irrelevant to what happens beyond phase one. I am not for the sand pit. I'm for best environmental practices. Right now, I'm a biologist. I'm a scientist. For the past 40 years, that's what I do. And so right now, I can see the nature being pushed into our properties right now. Some of it is great, some of it not so great. The rattlesnakes I don't like so much. But, but again, I just want to just make it very, very clear and emphasize the fact that, I had an opportunity. I sat down with Mr. Southworth. I appreciate his transparency and openness to answering questions, but there are still a lot of unanswered questions for the future. So that's one thing I just want you to think about, is not just about, the effect today, but it's the effect for the future. Because, there's going to be development, there's going to be change, and change is not all bad, and I'm not against it. But what I am for is for what is right. Do it right for Citrus County's future, which is and has been built on transparency. And it's just an incredible place to live, and that's why people move here. And I want that to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Waldron, and I live at 1550 North Hadjack Path, right next to the Parkway development that's going on right now, prior to what you're talking about. I'm here to tell you that the sand mine, I have COPD, and the FDOT put a 60-foot sand hill in a large lagoon that they used for storage for sand for the parkway. They piled it between 60 and 100 feet high. And I don't care what type of buffer you put up. Those people are going to be living in the Sahara Desert when the wind blows. I could not see. I could not go outside and enjoy my property. I was homebound for weeks because the FDOT wanted the sand. Nobody asked me or got a permit to put a 60-foot mountain of wind-blown sand for a year next to my property. The paint on my car. Nobody bought me a new car. My screened-in porch that I had put on the back of my house so my cats could enjoy the fresh air. That porch continually had sand on it. The sand goes right through the screen. So you're telling me that a buffer is going to control nature? And wind is not going to be destroying people's property? And the vibration of those trucks dumping and lifting and loading every day, it vibrated the china in my closet. I have at least 30 recordings on my phone from my china vibrating in my kitchen. You tell me what's fair. That sign on that wall. People and
Ms.
nature.
Waldron. Thank you, Ms. Waldron.
I'm asking for harmony.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, there's a letter.
Oh, wait, letter.
A copy with me.
Okay.
Hi,
Ma'am, are you a representative of a group? or-
Robin Orlandi, Adventure Coast Sierra Club. We have a letter.
She has one on file with the clerk's office. Yes.
Okay.
I can vouch for it.
Ma'am, can you state your name for the record again?
Yes, it's Robin Orlandi.
Orlandi, thank you.
And thank you for this time to comment. I don't want to duplicate what's already in my letter of comment that's on file, but I did want to say that Sierra Club has objections, as I do personally, and they are primarily as follows. We would ask that the application be denied. There, in the documents, the supporting documents in the application, there are a lot of inconsistencies related to water tables, the aquifer, whether there's a buffer or not. There is I heard the geologist talking about sinkholes, and the Southwest Florida Water Management District letter asking for clarification identified an existing sinkhole on the property already, a historic sinkhole. So there is one there already. There were contentions that wetlands wouldn't be affected, but if you look at, this is contained within the Crystal River Borough Site Flood Zone map from CES. It shows the flooding, and I can give you a copy, but all the blue areas are when flood water does come up in the area. So the aquifer is very close, 36 months. We're going to be going through multiple storm seasons, and if you look at the recent record for the past 5 years, water levels are higher historically than they've been during flooding and other rainfall events. So to say that there can be no impact to the aquifer after we dig this pit in the ground seems to me disingenuous, because the water will be flowing into the pit and potentially carrying sediments and anything on site that's not contained. I realize that there's a containment plan, but that does not stop the possibility that a 500-gallon tank of diesel fuel on site, something could happen during a storm, or if lines on any of the trucks or equipment break and drain fluid into the ground, that could also be a source of contamination. But for our spring coast, primarily sediment is a huge concern that hasn't been identified flowing into the groundwater. And which brings me to the second point. Beyond the inconsistencies in the application document, there's also a failure to recognize the unique resources we have in Kings Bay, Crystal River, Spring Coast. Again, what this flood map illustrates is this is part of the Basin Management Action Plan priority zone. The direction of this flow is southwest, meaning if you look at this on a map, it's almost a straight line from here to Kings Bay. I was just in Hunter Springs yesterday. It's a direct flow to that spring head. That's a first magnitude spring. It's a world-class spring, not just a US spring or a Florida spring. It's a world-class spring. The definition of a first magnitude spring is more than 64.6 million gallons a day at an average flow rate of 100 cubic feet per second. So it's a unique resource, and putting a mine that close in proximity, regardless of the guarantees that, well, you know, we can't hit the aquifer, it'll be fine, nothing will happen. There are other springs in Florida that have been impacted by mining. It's not just pollutants or nitrates, as one of the petitioners described. It's also potential changes in spring flow, fracturing of the surface. There's multiple questions about will they dig into the aquifer. At one point in the petitioner's narrative, it says there is no surface aquifer. Then it's, well, we're going to only dig into the surface aquifer, but there won't be dewatering. Well, if the sand is in the aquifer, it's going to be wet, which means when it comes up, water is going to come off of it, whether there's a pump installed or not. And as Mr. Waugh pointed out, it doesn't say they will not dewater. It says it's not planned. But if the pit fills up, and we have a local example at Felburn Park, just up off the Barge Canal, they were digging there, they hit the aquifer, there's an incredible lake there. So if that were to happen, in this location and they still need to remove the sand, they would have to dewater it. Additionally, Justin Hall from FDOT did say that this sand was supplemental. It was not needed, that the requirements had already been filled.
All right.
That 5 minutes went very fast.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you
always
very
does.
much.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir? And just so y'all know, I intend to take a brief recess at 3 o'clock. 2 hours, I think, is, so I'll give 5 minutes for people to stretch at about 3 o'clock. Thank you.
My name is Kjell Tandberg. I live in Pine Ridge, pretty far away from the proposed sand pit, but still, I'm a Pine Ridge resident, and I feel for the people that is living close to where it will happen, or could happen. My background, actually, I have a unique position on dust. I used to work for Rinker, which was prior to the current owner of the cement facility. So I worked in Brooksville, in limestone, in dust. I also traveled to Rinker's facilities, sand pits in Central Florida. And even though sand is fairly clean, it turned into dust. And especially if you use the off-road trucks that you're talking about, which is between 20 and 30 ton, they will grind the surface, whether it's sand or limestone, really doesn't matter. It will grind it to pulver, and it will blow in the wind like dust, like nobody's business. That's my experience, and I have 6 years of it, pulling out dust out of my nose every day. I came home from work. Just having horses. I have horses in Pine Ridge. Just the hoof on the horses in our sand field is enough to grind up the sand that we have there into powder. So in any windstorm or wind, I have sand and dust blowing into the other part of the yard. So if somebody says that it will be dust, it will be dust, regardless of what they're saying. Anyway, when it comes to the permit, they're saying that this is a temporary thing, and but they had a lot of leeway in it's not planned right now, but it might be if it comes up. If someone were to approve this, I suggest that it would be a temporary, that it can only be used for this and nothing else. Make them commit to that, they revert back to the current use of the land, so it doesn't become a permanent alteration of the site, so that if, for instance, somebody come up with the idea, yeah, there's a great sand, we want to use it in the future, that this doesn't become something that they do forever and ever. Besides this hearing, to my fellow Pine Ridge residents.
I am sorry, sir.
Okay, fine.
That's about it. Thank you.
Let's make our own city.
Thank you for your time. Good afternoon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Dee Castellano, and I live in Pine Ridge Equestrian Community. Have you considered the impact of the sand on the Pine Ridge community? Pine Ridge is a hidden gem, an equestrian community created in 1972. It boasts miles of acreage and unique development with diverse styles and layouts. This community has amazing amenities to offer, such as 28 miles of horseback and walking trails. It's a 94-acre complex with community barn that accommodates 17 private owners' horses. It has 6 show rings, a cross-country course. We have tennis, pickleball, shuffleboard, dog park, plane flying field, state-of-the-art playground, a gazebo, 2 meeting rooms, one with a commercial kitchen and one smaller with a full kitchen. Maintenance and administrative offices are on the complex. There are many clubs maintained by residents, games, bingo, and a community cleanup group. Other clubs are equestrian, poker, sewing, reading, quilting, fishing, airplane, bowling, tennis, pickleball, bunco, and mahjong, and shooter clubs. So, and some species we have here are the Sherman squirrel, the black bear, gopher tortoise, bobcat, panther, eagles, hawks, and bluebirds, and many more. In 2020, Pine Ridge was the largest population in Citrus County, with a count of 10,999. We have about 300 horses in about 115 households. I hope you take special care with the effects of this sand mine would have on a one-of-a-kind equine community. And anytime you disturb the sand, it goes everywhere. I also have a horse. He's in a dry lot, and every time he moves his feet, the sand is everywhere. It's in my sunroom. The dog tracks it all over the place, and you're not going to contain sand. Just take a look down on 486 and 491. There is always a mist of sand blowing in the air. So, I want to thank you, and I hope you vote no. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Teresa Cieślicki, and I live on Nevada in Pine Ridge. And we strongly feel, and I do represent our Stop the Sand Mine committee in Pine Ridge, we strongly feel that application of this main sand mine at this location threatens the peace and safety of our absolutely wonderful equestrian community, as well as Crystal River and surrounding areas. So it's not just us. Research shows that proximity of the proposed sand mine to our equestrian neighborhood, farms, business, schools, and barns means the people, horses, and our pets will all be exposed to a very serious safety threats, not to mention, of course, the environmental impact it will have on water wells and the rest of the community in general. Now, there's been a lot of talk about dust. Well, dust is also a major concern to our equestrian community, as everybody said already. The primary source of air pollution, of course, is the excavating, loading, and transportation of the sand. The dust particles pose serious health risks to humans and animals, and respiratory dust causes diverse health effects when entered the human body, making acute or chronic damage. I do have a chronic asthma, by the way, through multiple systems and organs. Small particles can travel long distances, so that buffer is not going to stop it. Staying suspended in atmosphere, and it stays suspended in atmosphere for days or even weeks, so it's not just going to fall and come down. They are odorless, colorless, non-irritating, meaning that we'll not know that we inhale the particles through our lungs. And silicosis is a real concern around any mine. I don't care what anybody says. Now, on the other issue, a portion of the Pine Ridge Horse Trail amenity that butts the proposed sand mine becomes unusable, period. And it's an absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, straight trail that we all use. And it's both because of the health concerns and safety, okay? The words noise and horse don't go together. Some homes may only be able to access the trail through this area. That's another problem. And it really doesn't make any sense to purposely and intentionally place a sand mine next to equestrian community that's been there for so many years, based on, I guess that's
I'm
it.
sorry, ma'am, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Kerry Keith. I live in Pine Ridge. In collecting this information, 7 different addresses were found to be used in various documents submitted to the county, the state, or that was needed to research this property. It seems deceptive, and reasonable speculation implies many addresses make it very difficult for people or agencies looking for information on the sand mine application. And it makes it difficult for agencies to know exactly what property is being referred to, causing confusion on size or impact of the project. Documentation for this application provided to Citrus County is to change approximately 322.8 acres from agriculture to interactive. However, additional documentation to the county has led the county and the people to believe the borrow pit will be only 150 acres. This does not appear to be true. Approximately as recently as 5/24/25, the Southwest Florida Management District environmental permit application boasts this Crystal River Borough site project proposes to create an excavation pit on the existing approximately 490-acre portion of the property, utilizing approximately 320 acres. The bottom line is, if 322.8 acres is labeled as interactive, 322.8 acres may be used for this borough pit. Borough pit sounds simple, but it gets complicated fast when dealing with the safety of our water supply. Has the Land Development Office considered this? They only made a suggested condition of 150 acres. 2 rare species are listed on the property. The first was plentiful gopher tortoises noted on this property, as this prime habitat for them. And second, the southeastern fox squirrel was also observed. Many other rare species of animals and plants were listed, 27 in all. Southwest Florida Management District has 27 very extensive questions with multiple requests per question, asked due to the lack of information provided with this application. Did the Land Development Office ask for any further identifying information on this application? There is no operational description listed on the application. Why? Shouldn't the Land Development Office want this information? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pamela Antonucci. Reclamation. What people have been hearing and told is there will be beautiful homes like Pine Ridge built around a lake or lakes. What the application says, and I quote, while it is impossible to provide to the county significant specificity regarding ultimate plans for the post-mining use of the property, end quote. Has the Land Development Office researched the idea of putting a lake on top of a known and reported historic sinkhole, a large surface body of water on a sinkhole that can continue to drain contaminants into our aquifer? Is this really a good idea? If the pond is not a feasible means for reclamation, what will happen to this big pit? Will a boatload of sand need to be trucked on the local roads to refill and restore the pit? Number 8, Southwest Florida Water Management District for site-specific borings within the footprint of the proposed pond. There should be sufficient borings to accurately represent an excavation of this size. The borings were taken to identify how deep the water was, as well as the sand, clay, or limestone. An earlier geologist document submitted to Citrus County for the application noted 14 boring sites. The updated environmental permit only shows 8 borings. Why were some borings not shown? Were these borings unfavorable, or would they hinder the application? Did the other borings draw more questions as to the safety of this project, so they were not included? Number 9, research suggests a high likelihood of damage, particularly if mitigation measures are inadequate. The applicant or geology report team who is hired by the applicant is supposed to do the monitoring or oversight on this project. This seems like a major conflict of interest. Number 10, the Lecanto sand mine has recently been purchased. This property sits alongside the Suncoast Parkway at 102 feet above sea level, and it is outside the priority focus area. There are other mines in the nearby area that could also be used as additional sources of sand without the high risk to the aquifer. How did the property for the requested land use change managed to get rezoned agriculture in the first place. This property was rural and surrounded by rural. The agricultural rezoning does not appear to have been warranted, as there has been no agriculture use of this property evidenced since the rezoning. That has allowed the property owner a 97.5% tax break, seemingly without merit. This property is located less than a mile from 3 schools in Crystal River also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Kaleza. I live on Stirrup Drive, and I do own horses. We, the Stop the Sand Mine Group, are here today because the Land Development Office is tasked with making a determination as to the sufficiency of the information contained in the George Southworth application to change approximately 322.8 acres from agricultural to extractive for a new sand mine or borrow pit. The terms sand mine and borrow pit are used throughout the application, and both terms will be used synonymously as we address our concerns with this comprehensive plan change. The staff report releases states, and I quote, "The amendment is consistent with the requirements of the Land Development Code and the policies of the comprehensive plan," end quote. However, the Land Development Office did supply a list of, quote, "suggested conditions," end quote. We do not believe this to be true, as the amendment is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. If this amendment was consistent with the comprehensive plan, a list of suggested conditions would not be required. We first want to explain to you terms you will hear frequently in this presentation and explain this location is in the protective environmental area that indicates a borrow pit in this location is not safe. In Florida, where water resources are critical, sand mining can contaminate aquifers and springs, impacting drinking water quality and agricultural irrigation. The Florida Springs and Aquifer Protection Act wasn't put in place for these reasons. Crystal River is part of the Springs Coast watershed. In Crystal River, Kings Bay Spring Group is listed as one of the major 5 springs. Our local Crystal River Springs was named outstanding by the Florida legislature, and they are designated priority water body, or in other words, called a priority focus area. And I quote, "A priority focus area is defined as the areas of a basin where the Floridan aquifer is generally and most vulnerable to pollutant inputs and where there is a known connectivity between groundwater pathways and an outstanding Florida spring. The priority focus area provides a guide for focusing strategies where science suggests these efforts will best benefit the spring," end quote. This information was provided from Citrus County Geographic Information Systems. Address lookup specifically for sand mine location. Our Citrus County board members are responsible stakeholders of this vulnerable location, and they are required to follow the Basin Management Action Plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony Ayo, Pine Ridge. The priority focus area location of the sand mine is dominated with what is called karst landscape. Karst landscape is a geologic term describing the type of terrain formed by the dissolution of soluble rocks such as limestone, dolomite, and gypsum by water. Karst landscapes characterized by springs, underground drainage systems, and sinkholes. Karst landscapes allowed for rapid movement of water and contaminants through the subsurface, often with little natural filtration. Sandpit operations involving excavation and removal of material can disrupt the surface and subsurface, potentially introducing pollutants such as sediments, chemicals, or heavy metals from machinery directly into the aquifer. The high permeability of karst systems means contaminants can spread quickly to underground water, springs, and wells, increasing vulnerability compared to less permeable landscapes. In a study published by the Journal of Environmental Science and Health, it states Waterborne pathogens are known to reside in surface waters throughout the United States. Cryptosporidium outbreaks in recent years are the result of drinking water supplied from such sources. Contamination of aquifers has also led to several reported cases from drinking water wells. The high resistance to Cryptosporidium has a high resistance to typical water treatment facilities. Groundwater wells are the main source of drinking water in the state of Florida. Understanding the factors that affect the presence of Cryptosporidium would prevent future outbreaks. An editorial in Frontier in Cellular Infection and Microbiology dated March 27 to 2023 states Cryptosporidium giardia, Cyclospora, and toxoplasmosis are four of the most common waterborne and foodborne pathogens that can cause serious health problems to humans. The consequences of these protozoan infections can be devastating, particularly to vulnerable populations such as the immunocompromised patients, young children, pregnant women, and the elderly. The proposed lakes the applicant plans to create on the parcel poses a significant threat to the aquifer because the surface water can easily be contaminated and then seep into the aquifer. This can be especially dangerous in a county with a population of 52.5% over the age of 55. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Amy Danielson. I live in Pine Ridge. Furthermore, if the aquifer were to be contaminated, the American Water Works Association found that a large-scale water treatment facility would cost over $500 million. With a population over 100,000, we would need a large facility. Will the taxpayers be expected to foot the bill if this project contaminates the aquifers? Risks working in a primary focus area with a karst landscape. 1, a large borrow pit will alter groundwater flow. This would create water seepage, and that can accelerate limestone dissolution, creating more and voids in a karst landscape. Unstable excavation. The historical high water table in this area could make the soil unstable and prone to collapse. Southwest Florida Water Management District, which we will refer to as SWIFMUD for the remainder of this document, is the state agency responsible for managing and helping protect our water resources in Florida. SWIFMUD notified the applicant, and I quote, "The project is located in a sensitive karst area. A historic sinkhole is located on site," end quote. 3, water seepage. Water can seep into the excavation site due to the high water table, and this then would require dewatering efforts. SWIFMUD has already requested a dewatering plan be submitted for this application before they would consider approving the environmental permit, because they clearly expect dewatering will be needed. SWIFMUD wrote, and I quote, "Please submit a dewatering plan depending on the extent of the dewatering activities proposed. It may be necessary to obtain a water use permit," end quote. This is in contradiction to the applicant's application material submitted to Citrus County, which states, quote, "No dewatering will be done," end quote, or they will ask for a dewatering permit if needed. They also indicated no additional water usage will be necessary. None of these statements by the applicant appear to be true. Has the county questioned the applicant about this? 4, managing water issues can significantly impact project timelines and expenses. 5, in karst areas, storm water can rapidly infiltrate through sinkholes and conduits, leading to increased recharge of the superficial and floridin aquifers. The U.S. Geological Survey notes that karst aquifers are highly transmissive, with most flow occurring through fissures and conduits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Lynette Johnston, and I live in Pine Ridge. If there is an increase in surface water levels or groundwater levels and the borrow pit contains pollutants such as agricultural runoff, industrial contaminants from the massive haulers that are to be used for this project, or naturally occurring ground contaminants, the borrow pit with higher surface or groundwater levels accelerates the amount of seepage into the aquifer, increasing contamination risks. Potential water quality degradation would result. If there is a decrease in surface water levels, this can reduce direct infiltration, potentially exposing previously submerged sediments, mobilizing contaminants like heavy metals or organic matter. There is no mention of any analysis of soil or well samples from the proposed sand mine. There are 6 wells located on site according to SwiftMud. It appears there was no testing on any of the wells at the site of the borrow pit reported. Why? We have confirmation, and it is well known that there are high arsenic levels in 3 wells on Holiday Drive. A road that will likely be used to access the borrow pit and these properties sits 2,500 feet to the west of the proposed pit. The Environmental Protection Agency says the maximum contamination level for arsenic is 10 parts per billion, and the most recent test showed 24.2 parts per billion at one of those wells. Groundwater flow is from the borrow pit towards the springs. According to the geotech report, the nearest contamination site is 11,700 feet southwest of the proposed mining site. How were the arsenic properties omitted from this report? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, it is 3 o'clock. I do just want to take a 5-minute recess. I promise we'll get through this, but sometimes it's good to stretch. We're in recess. right, everybody, it's 3:07. I obviously lied about 5 minutes, but it's now been 8 minutes. So I'll give everyone a chance to get settled again. All right, so I think we're ready to continue. Sir, I think you're up next.
All right, my name's Tom Kaleza. I live on Stirrup Drive in Pine Ridge. The application to the county states, and I quote, "There will be no additional impacts to drainage or groundwater quality." The statement sounds like a fact, but how was it verified? There's conflicting information on documents submitted for the application and for the environmental permit. The mining permit application checklist to the county states, and I quote, "Mining operations shall not result in any significant off-site increase or decrease in surface water levels. Significant shall be defined as 10% or greater from the baseline established in the geological report," end quote. This negates the supposed fact that there will be no effect on groundwater. In truth, research leans towards significant impacts given the hydraulic connection to the aquifer, as noted in the applicant's geological submission to the county. Creative Environmental Solutions, or CES, is the agency of professional engineers and geologists that signs, seal plans, and reports for the applicant's application for the proposed sand mine. You would typically expect these reports to support the application. The reports do the opposite. They indicate the aquifer is at high risk. The CES report states, "Boring readings indicate," and I quote, "it suggests the two aquifers are in hydraulic communication. This notion is supported by the borings that penetrate sand and then limestone with no intervening clay or low permeability soils," end quote. Additional concerning documentation from CES Geotech Hydro Mitigation Plan report submitted to Citrus County include, and these are all quotes, "On the east and west edges of the county, the limestone is close to the surface." 2, the borings showed the sands were underlain by clay sediments and in some cases dolomitic limestone with no intervening clay. 3, in the project area, the uppermost aquifer is the surficial. Water levels measured in on-site piezometers found in the water table on site varies from 8 to 25 feet below surface. 4, excavation activities will intersect the water table of the superficial aquifer. I've got 22 seconds left. I want to answer one question that you had regarding the dust effect on equines. Consistent dust will have a significant impact on equine health through respiratory conditions. In addition, the noise can cause stress-induced colic, and colic can kill horses. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Gloria Adams. I live on Princewood Drive in Pine Ridge. The application for the Citrus County Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code Amendment application asks the applicant to list the environmental limitations. The only limitation listed was wetlands. How is it that this application can just ignore the facts that this location is a protected area under the state? There are way too many risks with the approval of an extractive land use change of 322.8 acres within a designated priority focus area. Damage to our aquifer could never be undone. That is why this area is labeled as a priority focus area. Under Mine and Mining for Citrus County Policy 17.13.4 states, and I quote, "Resource extraction, which will result in an adverse effect on environmentally sensitive areas which cannot be restored, shall be prohibited," end quote. The priority focus area also states it is to favor the aquifer and the springs. Citrus County is listed as one of the 4 responsible stakeholders for the Basin Management Action Plan that is used to guide the county in protecting our aquifer, the springs, and therefore the health and safety of those of us who live here. This policy goes on to read, and I quote, wetlands, rivers, streams, lakes, springs, coastal floodplains, habitat of threatened and endangered species, species of special concern, prime agricultural lands, prime groundwater recharge areas, historically significant sites, or other environmentally sensitive areas which cannot be restored shall be identified and protected by a prohibition on mining activities within those areas. Restoration is defined as to restore a site, means to put back the same thing that had previously existed. For example, restore the type, nature, and function of the ecosystem to the previous condition prior to mining, end quote. It also states the county will, and I quote, define buffer zones around the areas as resources identified above which cannot be restored and restrict mining activities to land outside of those buffers, end quote. This entire 322.8 acre is an area that cannot be
Thank you,
restored,
ma'am.
and therefore the buffer zone won't meet.
You got it. All right, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Taylor. I live on Pawnee Drive in Pine Ridge. The Land Development Code intent and purpose states, the Citrus County Board is responsible for, and I quote, protecting, promoting, and improving the public health and safety, protecting landowners from adverse impacts of adjoining developments, protecting and, where necessary, preserving our valuable natural resources, including ecologically significant land and water resources, end quote. Under the Mining and Mine Reclamation Policy 17.13.4, the applicant, and I quote, there shall be no adverse effect on environmentally sensitive areas, end quote. And in other parts of this application, the petitioner wrote, quote, groundwater quality will not be impacted by mining operation, end quote. In our opinion, these statements are not true, as evidenced from CES reports showing this area for an extractive land use change is at high risk for hydrological and water quality impacts in this karst region. Citrus County's own documentation on primary focus areas and goal number 17 states, and I also quote, the future land use plan is intended to enhance the quality of life of the citizens of Citrus County through protection of the environment, creation of favorable economic conditions, and the elimination of incompatible land uses, hazards, and nuances, end quote. Sand mining should not be allowed in the priority focus area or in the middle of a residential area. This is not compatible with a comprehensive plan. It would be irresponsible and a violation of Florida Statute 163.3213, which says that land development code has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Speakman, and I live on Saddle Tree Drive in Pine Ridge. In Village of Euclid v. Amber Realty Company, the Supreme Court established the legal precedent for zoning ordinances in the United States. The court, in a 6-3 decision, upheld the ordinance, ruling that municipalities have the authority to regulate land use through zoning, as long as it's not arbitrary or unreasonable, and bears a substantial relation to public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. The case of the 3RT sand mine in neighboring Levy County, as discussed by the WWALS Watershed Coalition, illustrates the many risks of sand mining. The mine's location in the Rainbow Springs shed raised concerns about its impact on water flow and quality, with Swiftmud criticized for inadequate consideration in its environmental resource permit. Similar concerns apply to Citrus County, where mining could threaten local water bodies and exacerbate existing environmental stresses. The Levy County sand mine is not currently open because a judge stopped the mine from operating, citing the Levy County Commissioner's failure to follow proper procedures. We have high expectations that our Citrus County Board will do their due diligence to protect, promote, and improve public health and safety while protecting landowners from the adverse impacts of an adjoining development and protecting the character and stability of our residential area while preserving our natural and valuable resources, as Citrus County stated directly as the primary purpose of the Land Development's Code of the Comprehensive Plan. Concerning environmental and economic impacts, the Office of Economic and Demographic Research's 2024 annual assessment of water resources in Florida highlights a potential water supply shortage by 2025 that is expected to increase through 2040, driven by rapid population growth and economic expansion. An extractive process like sand mining has the potential to lower water tables and affect aquifers, exacerbating water scarcity issues. This could increase water costs for residents and businesses or lead to restrictions on water use, negatively impacting agriculture, industry, and residential areas. Given Citrus County's reliance on the Floridan aquifer, any disruption could have significant economic consequences, potentially costing millions in increased water infrastructure investments. We ask you to vote no. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Dave Scarron with Pine Ridge. I live on West El Dorado Lane. Lee County is a prime example of the economic impact as they experience significant economic losses due to declining water quality from events like harmful algae blooms and other water quality issues. The estimated losses from another harmful algae bloom was estimated total of 195 million recreational and commercial fishing revenue and expenditures. The potential job loss in 1 year is estimated to be 24,800 jobs, and the loss in output is estimated to be $3 billion. The loss of water quality in Citrus County would have a devastating effect. A sand mine next to our neighborhoods has a potential to affect property values and tourism. Citrus County is known for its natural beauty and outdoor activities. It relies heavily on tourism, which contributes significantly to local revenue. Environmental degradation from mining could deter tourists, reducing revenue for local business and the broader economy. A decline in tourism could lead to loss of income for hotels, restaurants, recreational services, potentially costing the county millions annually. A water treatment facility, if needed, would also cost the county millions of dollars. We ask the county to please look more closely at the requested land use change from agriculture to extractive, as it does not align with our overall comprehensive plan in our area. We want to restate this again. Sand mining should not be allowed in a priority-focused area or in the middle of a residential area. This is not compatible with the comprehensive plan change. It would be irresponsible and a violation of Florida Statute 1.163-3213, which says the Land Development Code has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. It is the water and our beautiful springs that drive the economy in the area. The priority focus area provides a guide for focusing strategies where science suggests these efforts will best benefit the spring. The bottom line is anything that would change the water quality in the aquifer or springs has to be carefully evaluated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael Speakman, and I live on North Saddle Tree Drive in Pine Ridge. At the May 27th, 2025 Board of County Commissioners meeting, the narrative dramatically shifted when Florida's Department of Transportation, Justin Hall of District 7, the very official who had declared the urgent need for local fill, reversed his position. Hall informed the commissioners that the state's contractors had, quote, been able to source the material and that he personally thinks the issue's been addressed, end quote. The final big question is, why take any risks with the aquifer when the borrow pit is no longer necessary, per Justin Hall? This public reversal is the single most powerful piece of evidence that shows us this proposed sand mine is not needed. The entire rationale for this mine was officially and rapidly withdrawn by the Florida Department of Transportation when it was exposed to the public. This leaves the Southworth application stripped of its veneer of public necessity. The logical progression of this development is clear. 1, the mine was initially framed as essential for the Suncoast Parkway, a project of statewide importance. This created a powerful incentive for the BOCC to cooperate. 2, Florida's Department of Transportation's public statement that the material is no longer needed removes this incentive and obliterates the project's primary justification. 3, the application can no longer be considered as a response to public need. It must now be evaluated on its own merits as a speculative private business venture. If the state of Florida no longer needs this sand, why should Citrus County risk the health of its citizens, the purity of its water, and the character of its communities to approve a 322.8 acre sand mine for the sole benefit of one private developer? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joe Hicks. I lived in Crystal River for many years, and then I recently moved over to Beverly Hills. I would like everybody to remember that the environmental expert stated to you just a few minutes ago that the clay and sandstone barrier to the water table was imperfect. His words, not mine. U.S. Geological Survey, I can provide copies or pages, but it's common knowledge. U.S. Geological Survey groundwater report for Citrus County on page 23, it clearly shows that the aquifer flows pretty much directly from the subject property straight into Three Sisters, Hunter, and Crystal River. Pretty much there's an arrow on the thing that just says straight goes over there. Heavy metals, we can hear about arsenic earlier, but you also have to include PCBs and others. These do not naturally dissipate ever. And so they'll go into the ground and be safe under a log, in a transformer that's been buried for 15 years, and they're safe. The spates of water and so forth that come by do not disturb them, and so the metals stay put where they are. However, when they are disturbed, like mining operations could do, then the newly released metals flow or leach through these imperfect barriers, this is the experts' words, into the water table, and then they're transported to the springs. So I invite you to go to Google and draw a line between this application and Three Sisters. Draw another one to Hunter Springs, and you will find that it's very, very short distance as the water goes. Remember, in a river, as the water flows, heavy things will float, and so the further away you get, the more opportunity these metals have to stick and become undangerous again. The last of 4 points is that currently the National Institute of Health, NIH, their position is that these metals, including arsenic, PCBs, they do cross the placenta forever. Female birth organ that is necessary for a baby.
I'm aware of what a placenta is.
Okay, thank you. I just saw wide-eyed there when I said.
It's just not every day at one of these hearings that you hear or talk about them.
Well,
but I appreciate you bringing it up.
This is really important because humans have one and manatees have one. and Three Sisters, Honeydews, and so forth. So these heavy metals cross the placenta, and it's common science knowledge that miscarriage, birth defects, increased stillbirth to human and manatee populations, therefore by the metals disturbed so closely to the water. If this was 5 or 7 or 10 or 15 miles upstream, the metals would have much more opportunity to settle again, and therefore not cause three-flippered manatees and deaths in our citizens who use wells.
Thank you, sir.
I hope you recommend no.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Nora Cloud. I live in Homosassa. I've been a resident in Citrus County for 35 years. I feel like this application reeks of opportunistic greed. The site is totally inappropriate for mining. Our nature coast is a delicate environmental ecosystem. Funny how it's always outside greed that wants to rape our county. Wetlands cannot truly be mitigated. Their purpose goes far beyond habitat. They regenerate our aquifer and absorb carbon, just to name a couple purposes that sustain life. Many of us did not want the Parkway extension in the first place, but it was shoved down our throats. Now this, when does it stop? I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak, and please consider a no vote to this application.
Thank you, ma'am.
Maybe I might. Hi, my name is Natasha Savage, and I'm on 6590 West Rio Grande. I've lived in this area and grew up in Pine Ridge since middle school and just north of the mine. And there was a sand pit just south of the mine there, and I never remember any dust. But I was still very afraid for my neighbors with COPD, perhaps, and for the horses when I heard reports from a website that cited articles. Those turned out to be not valid, and there hasn't been silicosis that I could find in the state from these kind of operations. And then the other science that they were citing is not really accurate either, not all of it. So some of these things can be mitigated. And I was really upset when Justin Hall sent that email, but then it turned out to be bogus, and he couldn't try to just overreach. I went to the meeting, and Mr. Southworth was there, and then I found that it's going to be a lake. If it is going to be a lake, a temporary excavation of the dirt is fine and that's going to be monitored if it will be. I think that he would be open to a development agreement, so I would ask that you guys approve it if those conditions are met. And if you looked into, I'd also like you to look into the traffic consequences. As my other environmentalist friends have mentioned, or not friends, but neighbors, the BMAP is very important. I'm a water lover, and it's very, very important for us to have our springs, but the traffic runoff can pose more of a risk for sinkholes, I feel, perhaps, than this lake. So I was in a serious accident. I've lost 2 friends at the intersection of 486 and Pine Ridge Boulevard. That's another risk I'd like you guys to consider, is 300 dirt trucks, this site being unique, because the sand mine in Lecanto and the SMG site might not avoid those dirt trucks hurting ourselves or our children on our roads. So these are the costs. I agree with looking into everything, and I'm sure you guys will. I respect that you guys will do that as well, but I'd also like you to just look at the traffic risk to our aquifer. Thank you.
Thank you. You got a little.
Hello, my name is David Bishop, and I live in Pine Ridge on Sacramento Avenue, 560 feet from the proposed sand mine. I contacted Dr. Michael Annabelle, a professor at the Department of Environmental Engineering Sciences at the University of Florida. He looked at the geotechnical and the hydrogeological summary in the groundwater mitigation plans. His conclusions stated, and I quote, The challenging part is how will the mining be conducted, and will this activity have some impact on groundwaters and springs? The mining plan indicates that no clayey soils will be removed. Unfortunately, the plan does not specifically say how conditions with no clayey soil present will be managed. It seems like the plan should say that some amount of superficial aquifer material will remain in place, as not to impact recharge, magnitude, and distribution of water to the underlying aquifer. The scenario that leads to changes in recharge, most significant to springs, is a scenario with no clay soils present, but simply sand on top of the limestone aquifer. This discussion could be extended to cover how excavating to the water table will likely change recharge characteristics by generating evaporation of shallow groundwater, which prior to excavation had minimal evaporation losses, end quote. The well summary, which is supposed to contain a list of all properties within 1,000 feet with private wells, is flawed because only 10 wells on the east were identified. My neighbor and myself live on the east side and were not included, and we have wells. The wells to the north were also not included. Other factors such as dust and noise pollution were not addressed. How is the air quality going to be monitored? Under air pollution, it states accumulated material and dust shall be removed from public roadway within 24 hours. Who's going to remove the accumulated material and dust from our properties, our lungs, and animals? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Diana Bishop, and I live in Pine Ridge. Most of our community moved here specifically to enjoy the peaceful, natural atmosphere we have. You have heard all the reasons, both legal and ethical, as to why you should not allow the sand mine. There isn't a need to destroy the natural coast. The county has a sand mine already in place, and it's not in faraway Brooksville. It's in Lecanto, which is close to the construction of the highway. Why run the unnecessary risk to our aquifer, endangered species, wildlife, horses, and our health? The only person it benefits is a developer who will now use the government to have him make a lake or two built for him. By the way, how is he filling the hole? By hitting the aquifer? Everyone in Citrus County has everything to lose and only one person to benefit. I ask you, why risk it? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Violet Langieri. I live on Mallows Circle in Pine Ridge. And I just want to relate an experience that I've had. When we moved here, soon afterwards, they started developing Black Diamond shopping area. And we would experience sand blowing off of that so hard and so often that you couldn't see across Lecanto. Recently, they've started expanding the development. We came out of Pine Ridge one day going towards the development, and I said to my husband, oh, look, I think it's raining up there. We got closer, and it was sand. And it's just going to be more of the same. I really want to thank you for listening to us and taking our thoughts into consideration. And also note that I haven't heard anyone up here in favor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tim McLean, and I wanted to be last so I would get the most applause. But,
It's a good tactic.
I live in the uppermost corner of the yellow square, up in the Pine Ridge Farms. And I did have a plan of attack, but everybody said everything I was going to say. I just want to say a few things off the cuff here. I'm a Florida cracker. I'm not from Chicago or New York and can talk about winters. I spent 20 years in the military, so I do know how to shovel snow, thanks to Massachusetts. But there were some things that were talked about that I just think were kind of glossed over. I grew up in Hernando County, and there's a reason I don't live in Hernando County, and it's because it is wrought with sinkholes because of mismanaged development. When you cover weep holes, as we used to call them, or drainage areas with pavement, the water's got to go somewhere, and it doesn't go where it used to go, and that creates a void, and the next thing you know, it falls in. Living in Orlando for many years, in the Wekiva area, it's a very protected area, and I believe you're from Orlando. Okay, so I did some research on you.
That doesn't make me a Yankee or something, but you know.
No. But in the Wekiva area, they're very protective of the Wekiva River, and there's a subdivision called Wekiva Glen, and I used to be one of the senior managers in a company called Corvo that's in Apopka over there. In Apopka, my neighbor 3 doors down, the house just totally collapsed and fell in a sinkhole, unexplained. In Wekiva Glen, there was a lake, and my buddy bragged about buying this house on this lake, and he woke up one morning and the whole lake was gone because it sunk to the aquifer because of poor, you had the best intentions, the road to hell was paved with the best intentions. But sinkholes are a way of life down here, and growing up, I do have a wet spot on my property. And I went to get a garage built, and they said, no, that will drain directly to the aquifer, so you don't want to build on that. And there's many in that area. And they could be 10 to 12 foot in diameter, and they don't look like much, but it's a little depression, and that's where the ground sinks, and that's what fills up, and that's what drains. And the last thing I'll talk about is dust. Now, being from Orlando, and that's why I pegged you on it, was I was over there a couple weeks ago, and the Saharan desert was blowing in Orlando, and you could see it. So there's no barrier in the world, if it comes across the Atlantic Ocean, that's going to stop that Saharan dust. It's not going to stop the dust here. And one other gentleman made a good point about the tires grinding the dirt in the dust, sand in the dust. Same with horse hooves and whatnot. Now, I do have a horse, and so I had the same concerns that everybody else has. So I just want you to vote no like everybody else has agreed to. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment who has not gotten up? And this is the last chance.
Is there anybody upstairs?
We made an announcement when the public participation portion started upstairs to come down, so
okay.
I believe that room's clear.
Okay. Then we'll conclude the public comment portion of the hearing. Thank you all for your willingness to come forward and be heard. I mean, I think it's a brave thing to do. I, as a lawyer, of course, like hearing my own voice very, very much. But I realize, no offense, I'm sorry. But at any rate, I think what we'll do is we'll move on to the next section, which is rebuttal. So if the applicant has rebuttal, this is the time, up to 15 minutes.
Wait. I got to put 15 on here.
I can't imagine you'd have anything to say in response to that.
Obviously, there are Darryl Johnston again on behalf of the applicant. I mean, there were a lot of comments that were made that, quite frankly, are answered within the expert reports that are on file with the county. I will try to touch on some of the issues, and the biggest thing I want everybody to know is this is just not a permanent fixture. And quite frankly, if you think that FDOT would be bound by the same rules that we're bound by, you're incorrect. And if you think FDOT has identified some other sand source, you'd be incorrect. If FDOT wants to come take this property, there's not going to be a 500-foot buffer. We may be in litigation about those issues, but
you're saying that if FDOT needs to property, they'll just take it.
They'll take it
and do what they want with it without respect to conditions.
Without any of these conditions that we've worked so hard with staff to do to protect not only the Pine Ridge, but other areas that are in that area, and to limit it to what we're doing, just for the time period of the mining operation for the Parkway extension. Again, there are uses that are a lot worse than this, that would be more permanent than this, that I just don't know if everybody recognizes or understands. The Parkway, good, bad, or indifferent, the extension is going to get built. We know that. And good, bad, or indifferent, they need fill dirt for this elevated roadway that goes to the north part of the county. And that source is most attractive at this location because it doesn't use Citrus County roads. It doesn't impact so many things, and it goes away after the work is done. But let me address a couple of things. I'll try to say their names, but I'm probably going to butcher some of them, so I may just talk about the comments. There's not going to be any contaminants put into these pits. There's 2 pits, one on the north, one on the south, and there's not a way for contamination to get in from that. If that's the case and you say, oh, well, we don't want to create lakes, what about every other lake that's in Citrus County? Is that not a source of contamination as well? Of course it is if people are contaminating it. But here we've got sand. We're not going down to the aquifer. We're not going down and breaching the clay area that's above the lime rock. So those are on file. Those are part of the mining plan. Those are part of the Swift mud permits and everything else. The depth of how far we're going to dig, the sediment layer, all of that is on file with, and I'll have Mr. Foster speak to it if I'm incorrect, but is on file with applications that have been filed with Swift mud and other regulatory authorities. If there's any development in the future on Mr. Southworth's property, it's got to come back through this process. Now, quite frankly, it'd be wonderful, and I mean wonderful, if we could agree, if the Board of County Commissioners ultimately approves this, that after the work is done on the parkway and the mine stops and it's reclaimed, it automatically goes back to ag. But guess what? We're going to have to go through this process again to convert it back to ag, is my guess, unless there's some magic that staff can work for us. But be that as it may, once the resource is gone, there is no more activity of mining on that property. And quite frankly, if, as some people have alluded to, there's no need for it because the FDOT has some other source, then there never will be any mining material taken off of this property. And we've gone through this for no reason at all. But I submit to you that there is a reason, and FDOT needs this sand fill for their elevated roadway through northern Citrus County. There is a dust plan that's going to eliminate, or it should eliminate, the types of things that people have talked about, like with the Black Diamond Shopping Center and other areas where there have been wind that picks up dirt and dust and carries it away. It's the obligation of us through this application to make sure that there is water placed when it's dry periods of time, that we don't allow it to escape our property. And fortunately, there's a 500-foot buffer that doesn't exist in a lot of these commercial and other developments where sometimes the sand does get away. And I don't know if there ever is a dust plan as extensive as what we're required to do as part of this land use request. Reclamation, we've got a reclamation plan on file. The reclamation plan essentially is to do 4-to-1 slopes on the pits where the sand's been taken from, to grass, to otherwise restore the property. But there is not a reclamation plan to create a Disney World or a residential development or anything else on the property, because that requires additional land use changes. That is not a part of a reclamation plan. Even if these holes are converted into lakes at some point in time, that does not automatically, as I've stated, pose any kind of risk to the aquifer. The only expert testimony that's been provided is that there is no risk because there's no pollutants that are being put anywhere near the direct use of the aquifer, and there's a clay layer between the sand and the next, the lime rock that gets down to the aquifer. There's a clay layer that's not going to be destroyed. It's part of our mining plan. There is no industrial runoff. There is no agricultural runoff. We're just not creating any pollutants to pollute anything that's going to get near the water or affect anybody's wells or anything else. I don't know much, if anything, about the Levy County sand mine issue. I have no idea if it's exactly the same as what we're talking about here, but my suspicion is it is not. And there have to be some things that are unique about that. But fortunately, between staff and the expert reports that are on file and the testimony that's been given, it supports the consistency with the Citrus County Comp Plan. It supports an Atlas amendment to allow the rezoning, and the PUD for mining that is staff has meticulously looked through and finds to be consistent as well. One moment.
I have some questions when you have time.
What's that?
Okay,
well, I'll tell you what, I'm good for right now. I'm going to, if you want to say a few things, George? I want Mr. Southworth to be able to come up here, and then I'll conclude right after he's done. I think we've got 7.5 left.
Yes, sir.
All right. Hey, I heard somebody talk originally about who was smarter. Well, I can tell you, my mother told me I wasn't the dumbest kid in the world, but I better hope you didn't die. Okay, so anyway, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I want to point out a few things. This property is zoned agricultural. As somebody on the county staff mentioned, under agricultural zoning, I could clear this entire property of every tree, every blade of grass, there's no protection under agricultural for listed species, etc. Okay? Ag is pretty much a very, very powerful zoning. What we are offering here is significant protections greater than the current ag zoning represents. All right? And it does allow those protections to be in place now and requires and allows additional input from this group of people if ever it wants to be converted to anything else. Those are powerful protections that I think the people that are objecting to this don't really understand completely. The other thing I'd like to say is just, I heard somebody say, do you see anybody here that's for this? Well, the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of residents of Citrus County, all right? People that are in favor of this don't come to meetings. People that don't care don't come to meetings. So the only people that come to meetings are the people that are against things. And so it does create an atmosphere that appears that everyone in Citrus County is against this. This represents a very small population of Citrus County, and I'm sensitive to the fact that these people are in Pine Ridge and they are adjacent to this proposed mine. I want to meet their concerns. I've offered multiple times to meet with them. Very few of them have been willing to meet with me and listen. Most of them haven't been willing to even listen or let me address their concerns, except they've sent letters, and those letters tell me their concerns, and our experts have tried to respond to them. So I do care about Pine Ridge, and I do care about my neighbors, but I want them to realize this can be a benefit to them over alternative uses. And if the DOT takes this property, none of those protections apply. They can nuke it wall to wall, no buffers, no anything, because they're exempt from the county ordinances. That's all I got to say.
Mr. Johnston?
Mr. Wall, in conclusion, I don't really have any other rebuttal for particular comments that have been made. I think they're already addressed within our presentation and within the opinion and reports that are on file with the county. The only conclusion I would ask is that the expert testimony of both the staff report and Mr. Foster is that it is consistent. We ask that you recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners, where the board will consider whether to transmit the comp plan, whether to approve the Atlas amendment, and We appreciate your time, and if you have any other questions, we're happy to answer them.
I do. So I've heard a lot of talk about a sinkhole on the property. What can you tell me about that, if anything? I don't recall seeing.
I can't tell you anything because I've not heard about a sinkhole on the property, but I'm sure George knows about it, and I'll ask him to let you know.
Well, I'm going to disappoint you. I don't know about it. They could be talking about the wetlands. Sometimes wetlands form in sinkholes, relic sinkholes, paleo sinks they're called.
Okay.
So, but the presence or absence of sinkholes really didn't pose. It doesn't matter. We're digging it up. So,
Okay.
a sinkholes. I remember earlier I talked about breaches through the clay layer.
Yes.
An example of that would be a sinkhole.
All right. Another question I have is, I think it was represented, and I want to fully understand this, that if the property was to be converted into anything else, there's a possibility this helps with that. I'm trying to see, what does that mean? Like, what's the flexibility of converting it to something else? And why is that relevant?
Are we talking about after this activity?
I'm really not sure.
Okay. What we're saying is that if this is approved by the Board of County Commissioners, the resource is taken off, it's reclaimed. In order to make use of this property for anything else, it's going to have to come back through the system.
Okay.
And my comment was, it would be nice if we didn't have to pay an application fee and go through a comp plan amendment and go through a Atlas amendment to place this property back exactly the way it is today, or to offer some alternative use. But that was the only comment about that. It just means you've got to go back through the process. We will have essentially an extractive designation, assuming it's approved, that 24 to 36 months from that time period is not going to have a utility, except for whatever uses might be allowed in extractive that don't involve taking sand off the property.
Let me talk to you about policy 17.13.4. Resource extraction which will result in an adverse effect on environmentally sensitive areas which cannot be restored shall be prohibited. And the interesting part to me about that is how they define restoration. Restoration is defined as, quote, to restore a site means to put back the same thing that had previously existed, i.e., restore the type, nature, and function of the ecosystem to the condition in existence prior to mining. So what I think I need for this hearing is an explanation of how, after the resource extraction, it will be restored to, or can be restored to, the type, nature, and function of the ecosystem in existence prior to mining.
Well, it obviously cannot be. It's going to be a lake. And to turn it back into what it was, you'd have to take all the sand from somewhere else and put it back. And
how big will the lake or pond, I don't know, how big would it be?
It'll slope.
And ladies and gentlemen, we've done so well until now, and that's a compliment to you because there's so many people. It's rare that we can do that in a hearing like this, but we're getting close to the end, so this answer matters a lot to me. Thank you.
Okay. Bottom line, it'll be sloped. You move 500 feet from the property line, then you start sloping down at a 4-to-1 slope until you hit the water table.
Okay.
Then you continue to mine below the water table, and that creates the lake.
So we don't know exactly how wide the lake would be, but it wouldn't be
No,
but it wouldn't be 150 acres.
It'll be something smaller. It
Right.
depends on how high the land is at that location. So I can't tell you the area of the open water.
Okay.
I can't.
No,
I
that's
can't do
fine.
that.
I mean, I think you've given an approximate estimate.
Right.
At least an upper bound.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
And there was a question about this would not be considered an environmentally sensitive area anymore. It's just
That's not my question.
Oh, I thought
All right.
you asked that
Thank
question.
you.
I'm sorry.
All right. I think that concludes your time, Mr. Johnston, and I appreciate it. Now, in the order of presentation, we then have, let's see, if staff, final argument. So there's 5 minutes for final argument. That can be used by applicant. But I think you've just finished, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Does staff have anything else that it wants to contribute?
No.
Okay. Then what I'm going to do is take a 5-minute recess, and I mean 5 minutes this time, because I'm not going anywhere. So I'll bring it back at 4:02. Thanks. All right, everybody, the time is 4:02. This time I actually meant what I said, and we're back on the record. All right, so I think under the procedure, it's now up to me, and I am going to issue a ruling today. At the beginning, I really didn't think I was going to, and my own opinion and belief about what I was going to do has actually changed during the hearing. So you know that both sides did very well, and I want to commend each side's presentation and attorneys. Let me start by discussing some premises. I'm a lawyer. Like I said, you're going to have to listen to me. A couple things. First, someone brought up Euclid, very famous Florida case talking about zoning. Really isn't the issue here. What Euclid stands for is that local governments can, through the police power, enact regulations in the health, safety, welfare of the community, and that's why you have big, fat, 1,000-page zoning codes. Is you have police power, and so you can regulate what other people do on their property. The precedent for that goes back hundreds of years, where in New England there was a time when a bunch of residents in a neighborhood, maybe not so much unlike Pine Ridge, got upset that someone was going to put a gunpowder mill in the middle of the neighborhood. And lo and behold, the residents didn't like that. So our law has evolved over time. Florida Statute 163.3213 does not apply. And I also don't really find it persuasive for either side to talk about what FDOT needs. That's really not before me today. The real issue is it consistent with the comprehensive plan, what they're seeking to do? In other words, it's not a Mr. Spock analysis from Star Trek II where he says the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. It's does a property owner have a right to do X, Y, or Z? Is it consistent with the comp plan? And for me, when I look at the Citrus County comp plan, I actually start with Objective 11.1, which is a relatively new portion of the comp plan, and it talks about property rights. It says, Objective 11.1, ensure that private property rights are considered in local decision-making to comply with Florida statutes. Policy 11.1.1. The county will consider the right of a property owner to physically possess and control his or her interests in the property, including easements, leases, or, and this is the key phrase, mineral rights. Policy 11.1.2. The county will consider the rights of a property owner to use, maintain, develop, and improve his or her property for personal use or for the use of any other person subject to state law and local ordinances, et cetera, et cetera. So that's in the comp plan. That's required by the state, by the way. There's no option for Citrus County. It has to have that in its comp plan. And it's in every other comp plan in the state. But so you already see right then and there, property rights of an owner are considered very important. And that's where we start. But we don't end there. Then we look at 17, objective, let's see, and this is in the staff report, it's in everything else. Objective 17.13, the county shall allow the economic recovery of mineral resources while protecting its citizens and environment from adverse impacts. So it's not saying people can just do whatever they want. It says shall allow while protecting its citizens and environment from adverse impacts. And that's where the conditions come in that Citrus County's recommended, or if I should recommend approval. All right, policy 17.13.1. The county shall provide for the use of mineral resources and the reclamation of mined lands through the county LDC. Policy 17.13.2. There shall be no further new mining operations allowed in the Withlacoochee State Forest. The areas of existing mining operations within the state forest shall be fully reclaimed within 1 year of cessation of mining operations. What I want to point out to you about this is actually a really key section. The staff comment is the site does not lie within the Withlacoochee State Forest, so this prohibition does not apply automatically to this land. Citrus County could amend its comp plan to include other areas. They could include property adjacent to Pine Ridge. They could apply other parts of Citrus County. The only one where it's prohibited is Withlacoochee, and then otherwise, I've got 17.13.1 and 17.13 telling me it shall be allowed while protecting citizens. Then we get to 17.13.3. The county shall notify all residents locating within 1,000 feet of land designated for extractive uses of the existing or future mine. That's something that'll be happen at the notice, point of this whole process. Finally, we get to 17.13.4. Resource extraction which will result in an adverse effect on environmentally sensitive areas which cannot be restored shall be prohibited. And in the staff report, it talks about how Site contains scattered wetlands as well as the presence of some protected species, gopher tortoises, Sherman's fox squirrels, eastern indigo snake not observed but expected, and notes that there has to be a reclamation plan. The key part for this is this: what does restoration mean? Restoration is defined as, quote, to restore a site means to put back the same thing that had previously existed, i.e. restore the type, nature, and function of the ecosystem to the condition in existence prior to mining. And, you know, in a quasi-judicial hearing, I, as a special master, again, true in any quasi-judicial hearing, I'm bound by the evidence, okay? I'm limited. I can't really go outside the evidentiary record. I can't look at other, we have one expert in this hearing, and only one. We only have factual testimony offered from a few people, and the evidentiary record is hundreds of pages long, but public comment is not necessarily evidence. Nonetheless, the expert testimony testified it cannot be restored. I was very shocked to hear that, and I got to tell you, I think it's dispositive in this case. I asked those questions at the end because I didn't really think the parties had addressed it fully. I do understand that there's a reclamation plan, but what's testified to me is it's not going to go back and cannot go back to the way that it was. The nature of the property that will be there is going to be substantially different. I got to be honest, until that moment, I was prepared and all my notes were geared towards recommending approval, but I can't go against the text of the comp plan. So what I'm going to do is recommend denial to the Board of County Commission. And no, there's no, honestly, I don't know. I think that really the overarching policy of this comp plan leads to approval, but this idea of restoration can't be ignored. So that concludes my part of it. Is there anything else from the parties?
Just to let you know that we do have a tentative now we'll make it a certain date of August 12th at 5:01 p.m. in Inverness with the Board of County Commissioners. That will be the transmittal hearing for this application. If you received a notice for this application, you will also receive one for that meeting.
Mr. Johnston?
Mr. Wall, the only thing I would say is that, and I understand your decision, but I think both the staff report on reclamation requirements, the reclamation requirements within the code, as well as our reclamation plan, addresses that issue that you've narrowly focused on as it's got to be exactly the same as it was. There's never a reclamation that's exactly the way it was.
I actually think that's a good point, Mr. Johnston, and I thought about that before announcing the final. I was surprised that the wording is what it is in the comp plan, but that's what it is. And just as it's bound similarly, even though I think it's tough for example, and I know they didn't speak all together at once, I think it's very tough for Pine Ridge, the 17.13, 17.3, 13.1, which I think really established some rights for people to create mines. This is what it says. So I'm bound by the text. The time is 4:11. This hearing is adjourned.